I like you. Pampered little shit that you are. I just like myself more.
I understand.
I'm sorry it has to be this way.
Why are you sorry? Because you're an evil bastard with no conscience and no heart? That's what I liked about you in the first place.
We had some good days together.
Yes, we did.
What will you do?
I suppose I'll have to kill the mountain myself. Won't that make for a great song?
I hope to hear them sing it one day.
Welcome back, my lords and ladies, to the Cast Beyond the Wall. We are your guide to all things Westerosi, and we're here to bring you a review, analysis, and fan v fan debate of each episode of HBO's hit show, Game of Thrones. I'm your host, Caleb Masters, and to cite my very favorite character in Game of Thrones, people die at their dinner tables, they die in their beds, they die squatting over the chamber pots. This has been the thesis of Game of Thrones in a nutshell. And I am thrilled to be hosting the final episode of the Cast Beyond the Wall with you, the listener. Today, we're going to give you our final review of Season 8 of Game of Thrones. We're going to look at the series as a whole and what this final season means for that season, how well it works or doesn't work. We're going to be answering some last listener questions that have come in, and we're just going to discuss our feelings about this whole series as it wraps up. And joining me for the first time in the same room, this has never happened before. This is unprecedented for the Cast Beyond the Wall. Visiting from the Dornish lands of Arizona. Sir, introduce yourself.
Here in the flesh, I'm Austin Lucari. And as always, I drink and I know things.
He is drinking, and he knows a couple things.
Ostradamus never lets you down.
Visiting from, in person, in the flesh, from the Starkish lands of Kentucky. Sir, introduce yourself.
My name is Daniel Stull, and I feel like the theme of the entire show can really be wrapped up with this quote. And I have a tender spot in my heart for cripples and bastards and broken things.
Wow, that's like the thesis of the show. I was going way darker and more malicious with mine, but you guys said it all. I feel like we got Game of Thrones encapsulated into 3 different quotes right there. Listeners, this is the first time Daniel, Austin, and I have actually recorded together in person in the same room. Daniel and Austin had never met before in real life, so probably not a huge deal for listeners, but it's a pretty cool thing for us. Yeah?
Yeah. I agree. Very cool.
Yeah, it's very exciting. You know, as soon as I saw Austin, we shared a big hug, and it was exciting.
And I think we both mutually agreed that Caleb cheated in order to win the fantasy league.
I did no such thing. No such thing whatsoever. Awesome.
I'm just glad Daniel and I have so much in common, and that we both have a mutual hatred of Caleb.
This is going to be a little more chill, a little more relaxed. Obviously, we're not recapping anything. This is the last episode, but if you do want to keep up with any of our pursuits here or any updates on the Cast Beyond the Wall, you can track all of our posts on our social media channels, including Twitter at cast_beyond_GOT, and on Facebook at facebook.com/Cast Beyond the Wall. Follow us there if we do have any updates. That's a great place to find us. I would recommend the best way to keep up with any of our potential future ventures, of course, is Twitter. Or you could just stay subscribed to this podcast. In fact, I'd really appreciate it if you did, because you're going to be able to find out all the cool new things we might be doing in the future. For this episode, though, we're not recapping it. So I want to take listeners down memory lane here for a second, because way back in the day, when this show started, and it was me, Daniel, and another gentleman named Alan Bama Rogers. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the first podcast for A Cast Beyond the Wall, a Game of Thrones fan podcast. We are created by fans of the show, and we are going to amass an army of fans to talk about all the sex position and killing and backstabbing and Tyrion and dragons. Dragons! And I am one of 3 hosts here today. My name is Caleb, son of Daniel, House Masters. And I'm joined today by...
Bama, son of Philip, House Rogers.
And...
I am Daniel, son of Kevin, House Stull.
And we are going to be your three regular hosts here, and we are going to dissect every episode down to the nitty-gritty. We're going to, ice and fire this thing up. It started with us talking around a laptop with no microphones, and we had Austin as a guest host. I didn't really know how it worked, so we just called him on his cell phone and set it on the laptop. That's some behind-the-scenes knowledge for you. But you know what else we did back in the olden days of the podcast? We've come a long way since then. We use all sorts of fancy technology to capture these remote recordings. But one thing we did that I really want to bring back just for this final episode is we used to have a question of the week. In fact, when Austin first appeared for our guest host, we literally basically did mini interviews of every guest host. It took half the, I went back and listened. I was like, wow, these took half the episode.
It was a long, huge segment for sure.
Yeah, because it was 5 or 6 questions. But we also always kicked off each episode with a question of the week, where basically we took a question based on the episode, talked about it just to kind of break the ice, and then we jumped right into the recap. Because this is our show, and we do things the way we want, we're going to go back to the roots and do a question of the week before we jump into our review of Season 8 and get into some listener questions. Question of the week. What is your favorite heel turn of a hero in another TV show, movie, or video game? And heel turn, of course, for those of you who aren't wrestling fans, whenever a heroic character does something real nasty and turns villainous, they call it turning heel. I think it's kind of taken on a larger meaning in pop culture, but just for some context, that's what it means. So basically, when a good guy becomes a bad guy, kind of similar to how Daenerys became a bad guy in the last couple episodes of Game of Thrones. So we're going to start with you, Austin Lucari.
I think the one that comes to mind for me is Michael Corleone from The Godfather. He starts off as the character that doesn't really want to be a part of the family business, is disgusted with his father and the types of work that he does, and knowing the kind of dirty business that his family is in. With the death of his father and his older brother, he's forced to take over control of the family business and eventually embraces that lifestyle entirely with this kind of huge death montage that we have towards the end of the movie. It's probably one of the most classic examples of a heel turn type character.
It's kind of honestly, I mean, kind of like Darth Vader level.
Yeah.
It's that kind of iconic, I would say.
I'm going to throw a secondary one in there for any of you Borderlands fans out there. In Borderlands, the pre-sequel, great video game. Well, worst of the series, but
okay video game, great story, and a very great video game franchise.
Yeah, exactly. Handsome Jack, he is the villain in Borderlands 2. In the pre-sequel, you get to see how he comes from being a heroic type character who wants to do good and help people, and eventually turns evil through various circumstances and betrayals and a twisted sense of justice. It's a very good story, and one that comes to mind because I've been playing that game a lot in preparation to the third game coming out in September.
Coming soon, September, Borderlands 3. Cheers to that. Daniel Stull, character you would pick, your favorite character who's turned heel.
So I actually kind of had two that came to mind as well. I think we have to mention Walter White. I feel like Breaking Bad, that's the entire point of the show. You see this character who's kind of, he starts off as this character who's very... middle-aged man, just kind of going through the motions of life, doesn't have a lot of passion or, kind of a dull character, if you will.
He's milquetoast.
Yeah, exactly. And he's got a family and he's just going through the motions, right? But then, this terrible thing happens to him. He gets diagnosed with cancer and he becomes a very desperate man. And you see the slow descent, if you will, into in this really, really dark path. And he becomes something... he's almost unrecognizable by the end of the show. If you watched the first episode of the show. I mean,
iconically, the premise of the show, whenever Vince Gilligan pitched the show to AMC or whoever it was, he said the whole pitch was, I want to turn Mr. Chips into Scarface.
Exactly. I mean, that is the point of the show. So I think it's a crime not to mention it. But the another one that came to mind was actually Gollum from Lord of the Rings. I think if you look at Smeagol, as he starts as this simple hobbit who's, fishing and finds this ring, and it slowly turns him and corrupts him into this thing that literally physically unrecognizable by the end of the end of his turn. And you even see in the Lord of the Rings itself his struggle with trying to be this good person, but the power of the ring just corrupts his mind, and he's unable to turn away from that. So I think he's another one that I would have to mention.
Man, we're mentioning Smeagol Gollum here. This podcast is getting mighty conventional. I think we better end it if it's getting this conventional. What'd you say?
No. I love a good Tolkien reference. Anytime we want to talk about Tolkien, I'm game.
Austin, is this you soft pitching a Lord of the Rings TV show podcast? It's going to happen.
I mean, I'd listen to it.
And by the way, not only is it happening, one of the writers on Game of Thrones recently signed on to be a consultant on that show.
Which one? Brian Cogsman?
Yeah, Brian Cogman.
That's the one that old Georgie boy said that he was critical to the show.
Yeah, they often called him the air quotes third head of the Game of Thrones showrunner. He's been there since the beginning, and he wrote some of my favorite episodes of the entire series, including Kissed by Fire in season 3, and this season he wrote A Night of the Seven Kingdoms, which is probably my favorite episode of the season. So yeah,
which one? Which episode?
That was the second episode where they're all just hanging out in Winterfell.
I see.
Yeah. He was very good at the talkie episodes. But he also wrote Unbowed, Unbent, Unbroken, which is notoriously the worst.
Famously Daniel's favorite episode.
We're not. No. We're not going to talk about that.
Daniel, I have a quote here of you saying this is. You said this is my favorite episode of the season so far. Now, granted, that was only halfway through the season of season 5.
Yeah, I didn't have the full context, and clearly, I would not have said what I said had I understood what was really happening or really going on in that season. I don't know what you guys.
Daniel was just drunk.
Well,
he was drunk.
As I was going to say,
didn't say go home, Daniel. You're drunk.
I don't know. I was going to say, we haven't met, and we would never podcasted in person. But maybe you guys did something to my drink that night.
Maybe
somehow.
Remind the listeners what happened in that episode.
Yeah, let's get to the tape. You explain this, Stull.
I know this one obviously had a lot of controversy in it, and we will most definitely get to that. But I think this was my favorite episode of the season. A lot of crazy things obviously happened in this episode, and a lot of drama started happening, and things are starting to move.
Nothing has happened yet. It's been the most boring season ever.
Wait. You're talking about the militants started marching through King's Landing, ditching all the beer and all that, and then that scene with Barristan and Grey Worm, that was nothing?
I guess the Barristan scene was something, but frankly, he was not that major of a character anyway. I don't know. I felt this season as a whole has been a little lackluster.
Hey, things were sad. That's all I can say, okay?
That's the episode for those of you who don't remember, and we're not going to go too deep in this territory, but it ends with Theon watching Sansa being, it's not good from Ramsay. It's not good. It's not pretty. We're going to keep this podcast happy, damn it. I know it's Game of Thrones, but we're going to stay.
I'm a lot smarter now, okay? You guys have helped me along the way,
Hey, but it's unfortunate because Brian Cogman, in my mind, has written some of the, if not the best episodes of the show. And then there's that episode, and you're like, huh? I'm sure the intentions were very good.
Everybody has an off day, right?
Yeah, or off episodes. Okay, so on for my picks of favorite heel turn. Well, first and foremost, I'm keeping mine at television today. I thought a lot about this, about who I want to go with or whatnot. I do have a couple video game ones, though. But the thing is, if I tell you the video game ones, it kind of spoils the game.
That's why pre-sequel is a good one, because you're already...
Yeah, Handsome Jack. It's a prequel. I think... oh, shit. What's that game where you play as the guy?
Oh, that's very descriptive there, Caleb.
Oh, yeah, that one.
The one where you play as the guy. Mario.
Yeah, that time travel. There's the time manipulation.
Back to the Future? There was
Prince of Persia?
Game? No. No.
Because you're describing a lot of things.
It's the one where you find out at the end of the game that you're actually the bad guy going to kidnap the princess, but you think you're the good guy saving the princess. Braid. There we go.
Actually, Mario was a very good thing, because that's exactly what that
game is.
Reverse of Mario.
It is riffing on Mario. So, hey, Braid. I would recommend Braid if you're looking at video games. There's a bunch of other ones out there.
You did kind of ruin the whole game, though.
You could also say, hold on. Here's another one. I'm going to F it out, Austin. Give me some credit here. Also, BioShock 1. A little bit of that.
Ooh, that's a really good one.
Never finished.
Everyone's a bad guy, so it's hard to say everyone, and that's kind of a bad guy
in that one?
Yeah, you turn, yes.
Yeah,
but I just killed people and got a lot of loot.
But you don't know it. It's
it's pretty good.
That's a good one.
Everyone's
I really like that one.
Everyone's a bad guy, so it's hard to say you turn heel, but you definitely turn against a certain people. Yeah, turn heel. So if you're looking at video games, I'm keeping it to television now. So first and foremost, I got to say, Lex Luthor from Smallville, specifically, that was a 7 seasons of him turning heel slowly but surely. I love how they kind of... It was a lot more original at the time. Like, oh, let's like take these superheroes and make them friends, and like like over the course of like 7 seasons, like kind of like demonstrate how being a good guy is actually sometimes not good. Like sometimes your rigid morality actually causes more problems than it solves and creates more enemies than friends.
That reminds me of Superman and Man of Steel. Turns from good to bad real fast.
Hey, Austin, we're not trying to talk about that here. We're not talking about that here. Michael Rosenbaum's still my favorite Lex Luthor. There's like some downright like weepy episodes in that show. And honestly, I'll be real. The showrunners at a certain point, I don't remember when, because it's been a long time since I've seen that show. At a certain point, probably around like season 3 or 4, it becomes clear that they're way more interested in writing Lex Luthor than they are Clark Kent. And in fact, like Pa Kent actually, despite being an air quotes moral person, you could argue he's kind of the bad guy of the show. Like, so yeah, it's good stuff. I like it. But Michael Rosenbaum brings a lot of empathy for it, and you kind of see in a true Game of Thrones fashion. I mean, obviously we know Superman, we know where he's going to end up, right? But when you're watching the show, when you look at it, you're like, it's almost inevitable. Like, it feels like as you're watching it, it's really inevitable if this is the guy he's going to become. Like, literally everybody's pushing him that direction, despite him trying to not become that person. Like, everybody just says, well, you're a rich, snobby kid, your dad's a monster, so obviously, Anyway, good stuff. Michael Rosenbaum. And for Game of Thrones fans, especially Aidan Gillen fans, that's right, my boy Baelish fans, I got a good one.
King Arthur.
God, that movie's a disaster. That movie's an absolute disaster, and I love a lot of people who worked on that movie, but it's a disaster.
I just like Jude Law.
I actually loved Aidan Gillen in that movie.
I like Jude Law in it, truthfully. The rest of it's pretty bad.
There's a lot of actors, the editing, man. Oh, God, it's so bad. Aidan Gillen as Tommy Carcetti in The Wire. He doesn't show up until season 3. But he starts out... I mean, I don't think this is telegraphed. The show is not exactly about the plot twist and stuff, per se. He starts off as a very young, ambitious, and like well-intentioned politician who's like truly morally... He is driven by morality to run for office. He wants to make the city of Baltimore a better place. And wouldn't you know it, the more he like tries to make political gains in his career, he like loses all that stuff along the way and becomes the mayor. And is also kind of a corrupt crook. But hey, that's how it goes. If you like me and you love watching Aidan Gillen be Littlefinger, absolutely. Firstly, The Wire is an amazing show. Like one of the best, if not the best show of the last 20 years. But also, Aidan Gillen shows up for seasons 3, 4, and 5, and he's amazing. So check it out. It's good stuff. All right, guys. Well, thanks for that little throwback. Now, before we get to our season 8 review, I want to go ahead and start off with our first listener question. Now, this first listener question is a little bit special because several of our episodes this year were very long. Like, very long. Like, we recorded over 3 hours of audio long on a couple of these episodes. And we actually received a question from our listener, Keithan Lane Smith. So, this particular episode featured guest host Alexandra Bohannon. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and play the audio for you guys because we had an entire conversation about it, discussing Keithan's question. So Keithan, this one's for you. We'll be right back. On the note of listeners, we did a little tweet out asking listeners for questions, and we got one from Keithan Lane Smith. I don't know if the showrunners are heading up the new Thrones show at HBO. If you had it your way, who would you like to see produce, direct, or write the new Thrones shows? So firstly, Keithan, thank you so much for sending in your question. There are several successor shows in development. Successor shows, as Martin would call them, because he does not like the term spinoff. And I know for a fact that Benioff and Weiss, I believe, are executive producers, which could mean a lot of things, but they're not executive producers as in showrunners. They're like executive producers as in they're lending their talent. They're like Steven Spielberg on a Transformers movie, like not actually very hands-on. So that answers that question. So very minimal involvement from them there. But I want to go around the cast really quick and just get some quick thoughts. I have several. Who would you like to see write, direct, or produce a Game of Thrones successor show? Daniel Stull, we'll start with you on this one.
So for me, Game of Thrones has been at its absolute best when you have a lot of characters in a room talking to each other, when there's a lot of tension and you can just feel it. And there's only one of the best directors at doing that is Quentin Tarantino. I can just imagine Tyrion and Tywin back in season 3 sitting down with a Quentin Tarantino dialogue script. That would just be top notch. So Quentin Tarantino.
Their entire episode is sitting in the Black Keep in the dungeons. They're
They're
laying
just
down
talking,
there,
and you're just
for 2 hours.
so enthralled for 30 minutes. You're like, wait, they've been talking for 30 minutes, and you're like, yeah, and it was great. That's Quentin Tarantino.
You know, I know that seems like a textbook answer for a lot of folks out there, but here's the thing. I think it actually matches because Tarantino actually is really good at exactly that. And that was one of the things that I think that set up early Thrones to be so successful and really set the show apart from other things on TV. So I think that's a good pick, Daniel. Austin Lucari, throw it to you.
So I think what Game of Thrones really needs is a spinoff that's like breaks entirely from the feel of the main show. We're going to go full comedy. Yeah. It's going to be a comedy. We're going to have Wes Anderson direct this. All right.
I was waiting for it.
And could you just see like the murder and backstabbing in Wes Anderson's style? Just like completely rigid and without emotion. And it'd just be the most hilarious thing you've ever seen.
I can just imagine the Red Wedding as visualized by Wes Anderson. And like, you know, that scene where you see that, you know, that moment when Robb Stark turns around and says, "Mother," right before he gets stabbed by, Bolton. I can see him saying, "Golly gee," and then getting stabbed with very like over extenuated, like fake stabs motions. I want this right now.
He just like drops to the ground like a rag doll. It'd be perfect.
I could dig on that.
Oversaturated colors, scheme palette. It would definitely break up the monotony of what we're seeing with their outfit choices and set deck
the
now.
darker. Yeah, that's for sure. Well, and everything would be symmetrical.
Yes,
100%
very
all the
symmetrical.
time. Yes. Well, Alexandra, how about you?
Okay, I have two. One is more self-indulgent than the other. I'll go self-indulgent first, just because I love the Coronado trilogy. So Edgar Wright, obviously, that would be very interesting to me. Seeing something extremely hyper stylized, but it's yet not leaning full comedy. It kind of straddles into kind of action adventure, and then a lot of gruesome. That's like a frequent thing of Edgar Wright, especially in the original Coronado trilogy, like Hot Fuzz, and in like Baby Driver. Just seeing Game of Thrones has really great scoring, but it'd be interesting to see how they would cut more to the scoring and making the scoring like driving some more of the edit. I'd be interested in seeing that. And the other one, which is super also unlikely, but I think would also fit because it's like, okay, we want to be divergent from what we've already established. And who is a person who has directed a film that really diverges from the tone set by previous creators in part of a large franchise? Taika Waititi.
Oh, yeah.
Like, he's a man that took on a franchise, and I love Thor 3. It doesn't all work, but a lot of it works, and some of the choices are very interesting. And I would just like to see some of the interesting brush applied more to like something taste preference different. It's not stylized different, but it just is a different type of approach to directing.
It's like a comedic version of what we're watching right now. So I've got 4, but I'm going to run through them really fast. First and foremost, I've got to throw out there, director-wise, I got to go with my boy Rian Johnson. He is a TV guy. He's done films. Obviously, most controversially, he did Star Wars: The Last Jedi, which is probably my favorite Star Wars, at least tied with Empire Strikes Back. But also, he did some of the best episodes of Breaking Bad, Fly, which is a single location, which is 2 people talking in a room for an hour, and it's amazing. He also directed Ozymandias, which is the episode of Breaking Bad that's 2 episodes before the series finale, which in my mind, like the last 2 episodes really feel like an epilogue. That feels like the finale. Next, I have to go with another TV guy who I love, Damon Lindelof, who was the showrunner on Lost.
I'm just mostly laughing because it wouldn't be about a podcast with Caleb unless we talked about Lost.
At least once. But hey, more importantly, though, the other thing he did that I think is actually better than Lost is The Leftovers. Wildly underrated show on HBO. He's got a new show. He's got the new Watchmen show coming out, which I'm very excited about. Not because it's a Watchmen thing, but because it's a Damon Lindelof doing superheroes, and I am so there for that. Next, I got to go with Gillian Flynn, the writer of the book and screenplay of Gone Girl, and also Sharp Objects on HBO.
That would be good. That would be so good.
I think
that's like the first one I'm like, absolutely.
That's a good pick.
Please.
Yeah.
That's great.
I would kill to see that show.
Damn.
Like run either at least even just one episode written by her. I feel like would be great. Wild card director that I'm pretty sure most people haven't heard of, but they should. Lynn Ramsey, who directed one of my favorite films from last year, You Were Never Really Here, starring Joaquin Phoenix. It is an incredible film, very stylized, but also very real. Like there's a lot of like cool lights and interesting editing choicing. The editing and the lighting and the music, all that's pretty stylized, but really like the tone is very like realism. I believe it's streaming on Netflix or Amazon right now. So You Were Never Really Here. Check it out. Those are my picks. I will say I'm sure we're going to talk more about this in our final podcast about what we think about these kind of successor shows or what our hype levels are. But I have some reservations, but I will say all the news I'm hearing about this successor show, as far as casting choices and showrunners and directors, I am very positive on. So stay tuned to hear more on that. Keithan, thank you so much for sending in that question. That was a really great, fun little discussion. And I'm still pulling for Rian Johnson as a Game of Thrones film showrunner person. All right, guys, I think the time has come. We've made it. We have watched all of season 8. We have spent an excruciating amount of time talking about each episode. So let's go ahead and jump right into our review of season 8 of Game of Thrones.
I know death. He's got many faces. I look forward to seeing this one.
Everything you did brought you where you are now. Where you belong. Home.
Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about this on a season as a whole, because I just want to go ahead and preface this by saying, for myself, on an episode-by-episode basis, I've actually been very pleased with Game of Thrones. I actually think, generally speaking, most of the episodes are pretty good television. But there's a couple things here. One is, how does it actually work together as a cohesive season? Like, what kind of story is it telling? Is it doing it very well? I think that's one question. And two, this is also the final season of the series. So, like, even though I think the episodes were really good, generally, this season had a lot of things that had to do. So the question I'm kind of asking is, how effectively did it do those things? How effectively did it wrap character arcs up and plot threads up? How effectively, not on an episode by episode basis per se, but as a whole, do we think this was really good? Because again, I liked most of the episodes, but at the end of the day, I'm looking at the season and I've got a lot of things to say. But I'm going to start with you, Daniel Stull. What did you think of season 8?
I think overall it did what it did what it was supposed to do. I think that we got all the endings that we were supposed to get. I think that all the characters ended where they were supposed to end. All the emotional moments for me really landed towards the end. I think maybe how we got there was a little muddled, and that's bringing in some of the previous season as well. But I think that overall, the actual ending and the resolution for a lot of the characters really, really worked for me. I think Bran, as we talked about last week, is the one that's really an outlier. I feel like they really did not deliver on his storyline, and they could have done a lot more to really set him up as being the choice for the king or the ruler or whatever, since the Iron Throne is not there. But overall, I'm pretty positive. I think looking back over all the seasons, this is probably on the lower end of the seasons overall. But that still being said, it's still Game of Thrones. It's still great, and I still think it delivered on what it was supposed to do. Even if it, as we have beating a dead horse here, it is very rushed, and we miss a lot of those intricate details that we're used to having with Game of Thrones. I think overall, I'm really satisfied with this final season and final chapter of the entire series.
So do you feel like the show rushing... Okay, let me ask you this question. Do you think the rush we had negatively impacted the entirety of the show? Let me just ask that question.
No, I don't. I think I still look very fondly onto this show. I still think it's going to be, for me, one of the best shows I've ever seen. And it's going to go down as a truly, it is the end of an era with Game of Thrones ending. I think that, we're never going to have another show like this. And I think that despite the rushing of the final couple seasons, it's still going to stand out as one of the best shows we've ever had on television. So,
all right. So Daniel, very positive. Austin Lucari, he gave us the positive review. You come in good cop, bad cop. What do you got?
All right. Well, I'm going to echo a lot of what he said. In that it's a complicated season. We've been talking about it for, the entire season. I think the what happened in this season is really good. The how it happened is really bad in a lot of parts. Here and there, they kind of nail it. But a lot of it's really rough. Do I think the rushing negatively impacted the show? Yeah, it definitely negatively impacted the show. Did it ruin the show, though? I don't think it ruins it. As Daniel said, I think it's kind of like the spirit of what he was trying to say was the show is still some of the best television that's ever occurred. I think it's still like top 3 at the very least. And you could make an argument to be at number 1, potentially. So, yeah, it definitely negatively impacted the show, but it ruined it? No. I think it's still fantastic television.
Okay. All right. So yeah, I've got complicated feelings here because there are criticisms I've been not necessarily withholding, but like on an episode by episode basis don't really bother me. But yeah, I'll just go out and say it right now. We've mentioned the rush thing on this show a lot. I will say right here that I think the rushing actually negatively impacted the entirety of the show. Did it ruin it? No, I don't think it ruined it. I think the way the show is plotted, everything went where it was supposed to. I will say, and we talked about this at length last episode, Bran is the biggest, in my mind, is the biggest shortcoming. And the reason I say that is because I really felt like earlier seasons we were like, oh, this guy's going to do some big stuff. He's really important. And then in season 6, we actually got some really cool stuff. Like, oh, there's powers and tail. Look at all these things he can do. We had the emotional loss of Hodor, which was powerful, but it felt like a needy sacrifice. So he could actually use those powers. And after that, man, it was like just him. He was basically comatose in a wheelchair, like the whole time, not doing anything. We never knew what was going on in his head. We didn't know what his powers were used for. We didn't even know how his powers worked. So because they kind of just really didn't do anything for him last season, they kind of had to do something this season, and I think they dropped the ball big time, which led to him being crowned king feel not super earned.
Yeah,
I think
super hollow.
I think it's a good choice, but
yeah,
but none of the reasoning or logic or buy-in is there. It's just like, well, I guess that's how it was supposed to happen.
I mean, it's clearly the logical choice. This is why I predicted it way back in season 3.
I made a mistake. I made a mistake by bringing that clip back up because your head's never going to deflate.
Yeah, Austin only makes predictions on logic, so clearly.
Yeah. So who was it who killed Joffrey again?
It was Cersei.
Cersei.
Right, yeah.
Yeah. She loved her children, though, right?
Well, yeah, but she also loves the kingdom.
Even though Olenna Tyrell totally had a pure confession, and her whole death was all about that.
She was being used.
Oh,
so Cersei was using both Baelish and Olenna.
What? How many times do I have to explain this?
And they had no idea about it. Like they were just okay.
You guys get it, right? You get it? Good. I'm glad we're on the same page.
Definitely understand what's going on.
All right. So listeners who are really curious about this whole who poisoned Joffrey, just go back and listen to season 4 or the first season episodes of the Cast Beyond the Wall, because Austin has some wild predictions that he still hasn't let go of yet. Daenerys was a sticking point for a lot of people, not a big sticking point for me. But I will say this, because I think I felt that way about Dany for a long time. It was not only was it not surprising, I actually thought they tried to give her a lot of reasons that I didn't think she needed to do that. I think they actually tried to go the extra mile in giving her extra motivation. And in doing that, it felt rough. I honestly think they could have stripped it down to 1 or 2 simple things, not romance related, to make her do that. And I personally would have bought it. I'm also not on the Dany fanboy, fangirl, fan wagon who thought she was basically the Messiah figure. So for me, it worked. It worked well enough. It could have been more effective. I think that's how I would sum the season. It was good. It was pretty good. It was really good sometimes. Could have been better. I think more time. I think we had 10 episode seasons. I'm not here to tell you how to make a TV show. I think I actually feel kind of bad for Benioff and Weiss to some degree, and we're going to talk more about why I feel that way here in a few minutes. But just the amount of like vitriol hatred those guys have received online. I'm like, listen, they deserve to be criticized for a lot of stuff, but like they're basically being painted. I mean, in the same way that like the showrunners of Lost were painted when that show ended. And I just was like, you guys are so dehumanizing. These guys are just writers making a TV show that you used to love. And I know you've got complicated feelings about, but like, it's not like they're morons. And I think
the fact that they care means that the writers did a good job.
Right.
Like we would have not cared anymore.
Right.
We're still watching it.
Right.
We're still watching.
Well, and I'll just put it this way. Benioff and Weiss, this whole thing's a statusode, okay? Benioff and Weiss signed up to adapt George R. R. Martin's A Song of Ice and Fire. They did not sign up to write or finish it. George R. R. Martin signed up to have his books adapted with the belief that he would stay on schedule and his final books would be released before the show ended.
This is George's fault.
And HBO was on board thinking we're going to have more seasons. So basically, and then of course the viewers were expecting the show to like deliver a satisfying conclusion. So at the end of the day, I think you could blame George R. R. Martin.
Somebody's head's going to roll. If Game of Thrones taught me one thing, it says somebody's head's got to roll.
That's true.
And I choose George and Sam.
And he takes a drink.
Austin always chooses Sam.
He always chooses Sam. It's tricky because, you and I, we're all gamers. And what have we always said? A delayed game is better than a bad game. And unfortunately, with the way the real world works, actors' contracts, HBO's expectations and demand for episodes, you can't just take a 3-year break. Because in an ideal world, they could have taken a break for like 3 years and then come back, right? But that's just not how the system works. So what I'm saying, with the way the system is set up, how TV shows work, this is just a whole cluster. And I mean, yes, Benioff and Weiss, I think definitely decided a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, said we're going to do it in this many episodes, and by golly, they stuck to it. Even if they needed more, that's what they rolled with. I actually think they probably did the best job they could have with the limitations they put on themselves. So I think that's
that's definitely subjective, obviously. Like,
right.
I think they tried their hardest.
Yeah.
Could they have done better? Yeah, they probably could have done.
But okay, no. They definitely could have done better. But I'm saying with the limitations they put on themselves, as in they were like, they're the ones who are like, we're going to do that because HBO wanted more episodes. Like, so with them saying we're going to do it in X amount of episodes, they put those limitations on there and they committed to it and they rolled with it. And I think it works. It's not the best version of the show.
You have to hold them to those decisions too. Like, they got to be held accountable for those types of decisions.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I am faulting them for deciding to stick to those episodes. And because they did that, there was certainly a lot of rushing. A lot of the things we loved about the show early on totally thrown off the table. Characters not acting and characteristically, but doing things because the plot needed them to do it. I'm still never, and this was last season, but I mean, the whole zombie White Walker plot was terrible. But it ties in my problems for this season. And the reason I bring all this up is because it really touches on, I empathize with Dany fans who felt shortcommed, okay? They get the short end stick. Last season, I felt the same way about Baelish. I'll be honest. Like, I was like, well, I mean, on the high level, yeah, okay, Arya and Sansa team up thematically to take him down. Thematically, that's pretty cool. Like, obviously, the show was clearly heading in that direction. I think Sansa being a pressure point for him, that's great, right? But it's the execution, the moments building. Yes, that one scene was great, but the build up to it was just not there. The characters were acting totally out of character. It didn't make sense. And I feel like, to a lesser degree, that was what we saw with Daenerys. I don't think it was quite as muddled, but I do think it was it's a product of them rushing things and they're not really putting in the hard work they need to for us to buy how things are happening. And another example of this would have been Tyrion last season being like, yeah, if we just go get a white from beyond the wall, Cersei will surely see the error of her ways. Like, we all knew that wasn't going to work. And we knew and the worst part is we knew that he wouldn't believe that would work. So, I mean,
I think there's a lot of character moments throughout the season that don't make sense. I mean, Euron was a cartoon character throughout. Like, it was kind of silly. I didn't really like Arya in this season at all.
Okay, I disagree with you on that.
I know you do, and I understand why you disagree. My feelings probably stem more from I haven't liked her from season 5 on.
Well, yeah, no, that's fair. this season brought me back to her because I have not liked her for years. Yeah. Obviously,
I think we've disliked her for different reasons.
That's fair,
but the Hound, it was like cool looking. But I didn't think it was a good ending for that character.
That's another thing. Well, I thought it was an okay ending to the character, but I'm just saying that's another question I would put on the writers. With the limited amount of time you had, they made some strange choices on where to put that time in certain areas.
Yeah,
and I think the whole Clegane Bowl Hound thing was a very poor use of that time.
But then we get moments and I know some of you are going to disagree with me, but like there's moments that end so well. I think Jaime, despite my like very vehement criticisms earlier on in the season, after the final episode had aired, I thought his character ended absolutely beautifully.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of listeners don't agree with that, and I respect that. I understand where you're coming from, but I think when you look at it as a whole throughout the entire season, I think it was beautiful. Theon, beautiful ending.
Absolutely,
Probably
yes.
one of the best
Theon,
period in the whole show.
Yeah.
I think Sansa's storyline too, as well.
It's great. There were some really, really great, beautiful moments, and there were some that just weren't so great.
Well, I think a lot of the moments in the show are cool. I mean, Arya killing the Night King, that's a really freaking cool moment. I mean, did you like the whole episode? I mean, I did, but not everyone did. But I think that moment was amazing. It's just a matter of like, how well did they write to those moments? How well did they execute along the way? No, I think Jaime's great. And that's another thing. I think the thing about Jaime, it was shocking because everyone thought we were watching one type of story. We found out it wasn't that, but then they still found a way in the last episode to make it meaningful. Like it not feel hollow.
Yeah, that Brienne scene where she's writing the book really seals his
It
that
makes it
character
work.
arc.
It makes it work. The
it does.
moment where Tyrion finds them in the crypt, and then also the scene with Brienne, just really ties all that together. It takes a moment where you're like, this is dumb. They just threw him away. Why did we even have this arc? And then you kind of get a sense of meaning from it, just from like moments where Jaime isn't even acting in it.
Right.
They're just talking about Jaime.
Well, it's the impact of that character, the impact he had positively on the world. It makes him more tragic in a lot of ways because he's a guy who we've seen his best side, we've seen his worst sides, we've also seen his potential good, and we see how. But the tragedy is whenever he has the best option to be a better human. At the second that something goes south with Cersei, it's easier for him to retreat to his old habits.
Yeah,
but that doesn't mean the positive things he did go away.
Yeah, they're not invalid at all.
Yeah.
Well, like when Theon dies, when Ned dies, when several other characters in the series die, they believe they are doing something heroic.
Right.
Jaime dies not really believing that, feeling like he's just messed up everything, but he's doing it anyway because he can't help himself. But looking back, you realize like how important he was to the whole story, how much impact he had to the entire country. And to your point, that's exactly what makes him so tragic.
Yeah, no. So, we got to find a lot of tangents there, but I'll just say yes. I think season 8, I like it better than season 7. I'll put that out there. I mean, and the thing is, season 7 is a more complicated animal. I think the first half of that season is much better than second, like significantly better than the second half of that season.
We got Ed Sheeran in season 7.
Yeah, that was
okay.
Season
No,
7.
season 7's garbage.
No, I like season 8 better than season 7. I'm satisfied with where we ended up. Maybe not super on board with where we went, but I will say yes, the rushing definitely did knock this season down a peg from what could have been an incredible final season to a solid final, a decent, serviceable final season. All right, so were there any other storylines you guys were particularly unsatisfied with?
I mean, Bran. I mean, we talked about it. No others. No, Bran's was like. Did it end up where it needed to be? Probably. Did I feel like it was earned in any way? No, 100% not.
How about this, Austin? I'll throw this one at you. How do you feel about the Night King White Walker storyline?
Yeah, that's. I've been thinking about that one a lot. I'm fine. Like I fully believe the Night King White Walker storyline was going to be the final conflict. And I think that would have fit in really, really well with the themes of the show. I think where we ended up still fit very, very well with the themes of the show. And as you discussed, like we got to see the whole thing. I think this is going to work, and it did. It totally worked. I did feel shortchanged by it. I felt that the impact of the Night King was extremely minimal to Westeros and to the overall storyline. It felt like a disposable storyline to pull Jon and Dany together. And there was quite a few kind of big reveals, like with the Night King and the RNL equals J.
Hey, we're going to get to that in a second. Hold on. Hold your vote. Yes.
But it ended up being very disposable. I don't know if you guys felt the same, but I wanted more. I wanted more.
All right. Austin wanted more from the Night King and the White Walkers. Daniel, what do you say to that?
So not necessarily responding to Austin. I I can see Austin's point. I think it makes sense. I don't necessarily have as strong feelings about that particular one. What I do have stronger feelings on is not necessarily her ending. I just wish we would have gotten, kind of as Austin was saying, I wish we would have gotten more out of Cersei in the last 2 seasons, maybe even. Specifically this season. I think her ending is like the way that her storyline ends is fine. Like, I think it works really well. I just wish we could have seen more of her. I mean, we had an entire, there was this whole thing that came out this season where she was not, for the first time in Game of Thrones history, she was not in 2 episodes back to back. That's the first time it's ever happened. Like, Cersei has been such a central character of the show, and she's such a well-written character. I just wish I could have seen more of her on screen before she died. But that's just, I guess, more of a personal issue maybe, because, her actual ending, I think, makes sense and it resolves her character. I just wish I could have seen Cersei make one more big move, I guess, but...
Yeah, I will say, and this is not a cop-out, Cersei this season was definitely underutilized. I do think, she's such an incredible character. One of my favorite. Again, I hate her, but just an incredibly well-written character. Lena Headey just knocked it out of the park. Yeah, one of the best, I would say, maybe villainous characters, at least of the last decade in television, easily. But she didn't get a lot to do this last season. I liked how it ended up. I feel like season 7 and 8 were honestly supposed to be part of one bigger season. The way their story arcs kind of fit together. And Cersei had way more to do in the first half of the story than she did in the second half. That doesn't justify the fact that she had not much to do in the last 6 episodes. But I think if you look at it that way, I think if you look at it as the whole series, it's fine. But in the context of just these 6 episodes, you're like, not a lot for Cersei, really. To Austin's question, I want to say this, Austin, and this is, again, criticism. I think this show was rushed. I think the White Walker battle, okay, and I'm not a writer on television. I don't know how these things work, but I will say this. I do think it would have been more impactful had we beat the White Walkers in a season finale with a cliffhanger. Like, you're like, whoa, we beat them. What now? Instead of it being right in the middle of the season. We had that reaction to some extent.
They needed to linger in Westeros. They needed to destroy.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Stuff. If they had been around for a whole season doing that, and the battle had, even almost the same battle would have been fine. But I think the victory in the mid-season felt, it just structurally it didn't sit well with me, because I like the idea that, oh my gosh, we thought this was going to be the ultimate evil that was going to kill us. We beat it, but now we still have to contend with each other. And at the end of the day, I think Game of Thrones is way more interesting when it's dealing with complex political character drama than it is with, more traditional fantasy. So I think I just can imagine a scenario where we had season 8 ended with beating the White Walkers, and then we have another season where either short season or full season of dealing with the fallout of defeating the White Walkers, and that's where we have the rest of them going back south to beat Cersei. I feel like all of it just would have set, but we would have more time to think about it and let it figure out what it means. Because again, I think the idea is very Game of Thrones. Oh, you thought this was going to be the big bad at the end of the series, but you actually beat them in the penultimate chapter. The problem is when you do it in episode 3 of a 6-episode season, it feels kind of like a bait and switch, because it happens in the middle of the season, and you're like, well, this felt like the big bad, but then you've only got 3 episodes left instead of 10. To really kind of wrestle with the impact and how that thematically it works. I think it works from a story perspective. It's just it's so condensed. It's so condensed that it does not have the impact in the way it should have. And I just think it would have been a cool end of the year where you have a whole year to really sit what now? If we thought this was what the show was about the whole time, and we have a whole year to really think about it, that's just really good. I think it's more impactful storytelling. But here's one for you that I was pretty disappointed with. Jon and Dany romance. It doesn't work. I don't think they have any chemistry. I think the last scene works. I think the very last scene they had together works. I think where Jon and Dany are in the throne room. That's where I felt like it finally clicked. But I don't know about you guys. I never really bought into that romance. Definitely not in the same way I bought into Jon and Ygritte, for sure. It's not even close.
Yeah, I definitely think Jon and Ygritte's a much more organic, and I definitely buy their relationship a lot more. I think that's the woman he truly loved, and his love for Dany does not feel nearly as strong or natural even as it did as his love did for Ygritte. And so yeah, I agree with you on that point.
And Dany she's in a position where she has to be extremely royal, for lack of a better word. So you never get that warmth that you get from Ygritte. You never get that kind of vulnerability, and she is a character who refuses to show vulnerability.
But see, that would have been where the romance comes in.
Yes,
you know what I mean?
Would have been
perfect.
It would have been, and maybe more time would have helped. But they did have a whole season develop that one, so I don't feel like the opportunities weren't there.
I felt like this is going to sound strange. I actually thought the setup last season was more effective. Like, it's really weird, but to say I bought it more last year than I did this year. I don't know how to explain that other than like there's just something. I just felt like all the romantic scenes it just felt like something was missing. The chemistry just wasn't there.
Even the magic carpet ride they did in episode 2.
Yeah, just didn't. I mean, like, it was fun. I get what they were trying to do, but the thing is, like you know, when you have 2 actors, 2 performers, the writing's there, the performances are there, you just feel the magic, right? And it's not something that you can just create. Like, it does take a very special casting director and a certain type of writing and performers to make that happen. Like, it's not just something you can do. And for me personally, it wasn't there. Again, not that it wasn't set up, but like that magic sauce where I really believed in it.
Did any of the relationships this season feel that way for you? Because for me, none of them. Not Brienne and Jamie, not Arya.
Brienne and Jamie, I buy that. I'll buy Brienne and Jamie. Yeah,
none of them felt good in the moment, though. To me, I don't. Maybe I'm wrong.
Well, Jamie and Brienne felt strange because they were the context of the situation was kind of weird. But I buy the romance there. I know you have more.
There's definitely grounds for it, for sure. But like the execution of it was bad, and that's kind of what I'm getting at. Is the execution for Dany and Jon throughout this season was not great, not convincing. I think it was the same case with Jamie and Brienne.
Yeah, but this is the most important story arc, arguably, in the whole show. So
I agree. There's a lot of important story arcs that didn't really get great execution.
Daniel, do you want to weigh on this at all?
I mean, I'm with you, Caleb. I buy Brienne and Jamie. It's also not the same type of relationship, but I also buy Dany and Jorah.
Yeah,
it's not a romantic one.
They didn't get to do much this season, but I think in general, I buy that.
But Jorah's death, I definitely buy their emotion in that moment between the two of them. Yeah. So again, it's a different type of relationship. It's not the type of relationship we're talking about with Dany and Jon. But
there's chemistry there, though.
Correct.
Even though it's a different type of relationship, you buy that relationship.
Yeah, 100%. When he dies, when Jorah dies, I totally buy. Dany's just pure sadness and despair in that moment. And so that would be another one that I think really sticks out for me.
Yeah, I mean, I think that those are kind of the big ones for me, storylines that were lacking. I mean, there were a lot of people out there that were mad we didn't learn more about the Night King. There's a lot of people more mad that we didn't get more explanation on R'hllor, the Lord of Light. I mean, we already talked about Bran, and I agree on that one. But I will say, I think I do genuinely think that a big part of the problem with this show was, and I do agree with, I think been out for a while, one of them said this, and I think this is a fair defense, honestly. No matter how well they did it, there would be people who weren't happy. And here's part of the problem. This show has been out for so long. These books have been out longer. People have been obsessing over every single minuscule detail, every single scene, coming up with every imaginable scenario for how this stuff is going to play out. The expectations were absurd. Absurd. There was a year and a half for us to linger on like the last season, and like part of that led to just fans, on Reddit, all sorts of things. And that's why everyone comes up with their own version of like, well, if the show doesn't do X, Y, Z, then it's not good. And I just think I do think that's unfair. I think the expectations were too high. And not only were they too high, they were too specific. People wanted different things from this finale. I get that. I think that's very reasonable. That's the beautiful thing about art, is we can come to it for different reasons and we're looking for different things from it. But I do think a lot of the letdown is in part, not fully, because I'm not saying the writers did not. They messed up and a lot of they missteps. They rushed things, but I do think to some extent, fans and fan culture are just as guilty for the letdown as the showrunners.
There's some self-imposed disappointment,
yeah,
for sure.
And there's a lot of predetermined, kind of what you're talking about, Austin. After something didn't happen the way that a lot of people maybe wanted it to, and so they already predetermined before the finale had happened that they were not going to like it because of this one moment that happened earlier in the season.
Yeah, and that's how I felt after the Night King died. It was what I expected from the season changed at that point, and I was like, wow, that was not. I don't know what to do from here, and I'm frankly disappointed. It worked out. It worked out, but
I think that isn't that part of, and that's the weird. That is so. Game of Thrones is such an interesting thing to look at because part of the reason people love it is because it doesn't do what they expect, but then at the same time they want it to do what I don't know. I don't understand it fully. Like no one expected Ned Stark to die. I think that's part of why. Like the fact that Game of Thrones got as popular as it did is still kind of to me a little strange because it breaks all the rules, which is part of what makes it incredible. But it's just one of those things. Like the show is all about subverting your expectations and going against the grain. But then, like in more recent seasons, when it doesn't do things exactly in the way fans, and I think a lot of times fans don't really know what they actually want. They think they know what they want, and they get mad whenever it doesn't do it. I heard so many people mad that they didn't do the whole Bran the Night King theory, and from jump one, sorry, backers of this plot, theory, power to you. I thought it was ridiculous. Like, quite frankly, I thought it was the silliest thing. But people were mad, like they were like criticizing the show for not doing that. I'm like, no. Why? The show never did that. And it's the same way fans have invested in the prophecies on the show too. The show has had very, 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 very minimal investment in prophecies. Azor Ahai, I don't even think it was ever actually mentioned specifically.
That's true. But it did. I think it did capitalize on all the prophecies it made.
No, I don't think so. I don't think most of the prophecies everyone was losing their minds about were not in the show. Even
the ones that ended up in the show.
Oh, yes.
They did follow through on.
Yeah. Yeah, so that would be Cersei's prophecy from season 5. Now, granted, here's the distinction, though. A lot of people, there's the prophecy from the show and the book are not the same thing. They're similar,
Correct.
but they're different.
There's
and
one
I think
missing piece.
There's one missing piece that is in the novels, not in the show. And I think the show was true to what the show put there.
Absolutely.
And I think we saw the whole Dany in the House of the Undying prophecy in season 2. Obviously, we saw that pay off. That's a prophecy.
But you could even argue... I mean, this probably doesn't even need to go in, but like... You can argue that what was missing from the show, that extra piece of the prophecy about the little brother, basically, you could argue Jaime killed her. He drug her down to the basement and she died.
Yeah.
Like, you could argue that. Still.
Right.
And that's honestly how the prophecies have worked on the show
they've
before.
Been unexpected ways to...
and they're very ambiguous.
Yeah.
And even
that's
when
the whole point of prophecies.
And even when they are completed, they're in not the way that you thought
it's
they would.
It's always like a monkey's paw version of the thing. You're like, oh, I want it to happen this way. And then it happens in that way, sort of, but then there's always like a cost or a twist to it,
Right.
And so, yeah, I mean, listen, I'm not trying to poo-poo on fans. Obviously, we're fans. Our listeners are fans. And I think all that stuff is a good and fun part of the show. But I just feel like the expectations and the very specific expectations that have been expressed online, I feel like put the show in a place that there was in a lose-lose scenario, no matter what they did. So let's go ahead and keep moving on to listener question number 2. So this one comes from Steven Zoller. Steven Zoller asks, what do y'all think? And yes, he did say y'all in the message. What do y'all think of R plus L equals J in hindsight? For such a hyped twist, it didn't seem to have a major impact on the plot, apart of making Dany mad. What do y'all think about R plus L equals J in hindsight? For such a hyped twist, it didn't seem to make much of an... Oh, he wrote it. They were twice. Okay, hold on. Thanks, Steven Zoller from Oklahoma City. So I think this is actually a very valid question because obviously this was in the earlier, up until season 6, really even highly. We did predictions on this show in the earlier years about who's Jon Snow's real mother. And, I think we actually called it if we go way back, but like going into the theorizing about how is his hair? Oh my God, he's gonna be the one who gets the throne because he's got the Targaryen blood and all of that. Well, at the end of the day, like it didn't in this last season. The way that information was relayed, again, it was so condensed. They find out last season, the season finale of last year, and then the first episode, Sam tells Jon, like the whole thing. It just moves so fast.
And I want to make a distinction here because we did just bash on like fans' expectations and stuff. I think this one is different.
No, this one is different
because the show itself they set up Bran's power to basically travel back in time and see things that happened in the past and all this stuff in order to make this plot point happen. And the delivery,
it's bad.
The outcome, the impact of it just did not land.
No, not at all. Daniel?
I mean, yeah, I think the question's a fair question. I think it doesn't, outside of the impact of adding to Daenerys's, and for one, I mean, I've said this on the podcast this whole season. I don't think she was mad. I don't like. Maybe
I think people are oversimplifying it.
And that's an overuse. I think we've been overusing that word. I think the characters in the context of the show, you know, her father is the Mad King, so it's an easy term to assign to her, but I at no point think that she actually had like a mad turn. I think she was had a lot of traumatic events happen to her, and she ended up in a very, very dark place and make some really, really bad decisions. I don't consider her to be mad. But to that point, I think that the question is completely fair, and I think it's a valid criticism that Jon turning out to be who he was and being a Targaryen really didn't seem to matter outside of it playing into Daenerys' role to turn and become and make the decision that she makes.
And that seemed to be its sole purpose, which is frankly a perfectly fine purpose. I think for that
it needs to be more, but it should have more impact. It should have been more complex. It should have had more of a specific personal impact on all of the characters. Yeah. Because it feels okay. Because again, how simplified everything is this season, it comes across as like everything's bam, bam, bam.
Yep.
So it's like they cut to the chase. They're like, all right, so this information's out there. Here's what it's going to do, and here's how it's going to impact Daenerys. Cool, go. It needed to breathe. All of the characters, Jon should have wrestled with it. Dany should have wrestled with it, and it shouldn't have been
even Sansa and Arya should have wrestled with it.
Yes.
Like, we didn't get to see their reaction at all.
And honestly, I think it's a great. There's another again in a world where we had longer seasons. I can totally see the whole like Varys subplot playing a much bigger role where he has this information and figuring out how to politically maneuver. You know what I'm saying? And like, what if you have people picking sides, like internally turning against each other, like turning their armies against each other? Like, even though Jon doesn't want it, like, what if Sansa's conspiring using that information? I just think at the end of the day, the whole point is to plot Daenerys and Jon against each other, or more specifically in the season, to really be one of a series of things that pushes Daenerys over the edge to kind of.
I think you can't talk about this plot point without talking about Dany's heel turn.
Yeah. No, it's true. It's a key piece.
It is a key piece, and the way that Dany's turn is delivered, there is a plenty of evidence, and we've talked about this so many times. There's so much evidence, just even in the season, so much, so many reasons for her to do what she did in this season, but they happen in such rapid succession. It doesn't have time to ruminate. Doesn't have time for the other characters to react.
Right.
Don't get to see the slow change in Dany. It was just like rapid fire.
We don't get to see how any of these losses really deeply impact her. You know, it just happens so fast. Yeah.
So you don't really. It's not convincing that it's turned her in a way where she feels like making the decision she made was right in her eyes. It does come off as crazy, which is where I think a lot of people have an issue with it. And I don't think it was supposed to seem like she was crazy.
I don't think, again, I see with Daniel
in the finale. Like,
I'll say with Daniel, I don't think she was crazy. I think she was a very emotionally vulnerable, and she caved to her worst
in the finale,
instincts.
she talks about, like, she's not insane there. Like, she believes it was the right thing to do. She believes she did what was necessary.
In fact, she feels empowered by it.
But you don't get to see that. You don't get to see why she feels that way, because none of Missandei dying, Varys betraying her, Tyrion betraying her, Jon's imminent potential betrayal because he's a Targaryen, none of that gets to build. None of that gets to set up that decision.
Well, I don't want to beat a dead horse, and I'll put it this way. If Martin ever gets to write this, I'm very interested to see how he'll write it, because I do think there is a way to tell this where it does kind of harken back to the earlier seasons, where it's just a lot of people talking in rooms. Like, I think because like that sort of secret is a plot, like you could build an entire season around that piece of information. So and how all these characters react to it, how do they use it as political power? I mean, hell, maybe if you kept Littlefinger alive a little bit longer, and like he chooses Team Jon and Varys chooses Team Dany, and that's another thing. Yeah, well, I'll talk about that in a second. But I'm just saying, like, yes, Stephen, I think this is a letdown of that information. That information should have been a much bigger deal. At the end of the day, I think it served the core purpose it was supposed to serve to a certain extent, but it certainly could have been. It could have been, and should have been way more impactful and have been a much bigger game changer. And again, I wish we had 2 full seasons with that information out there for us to figure out and the characters to figure out like how this is going to change their course, you know?
And all that being said, you know, I think without Emilia Clarke, it probably would have been even worse. Like, she acted the shit out of the season.
Oh, she was amazing.
So she, you know, and I think I said this on the podcast earlier this season, without her acting sells the turn a lot more than the writing did.
Yes.
And if it wasn't for her acting ability this season, I think it would have been even harder to accept.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we've said that before. Just a shout out to her because she was phenomenal this season.
I think all of the actors this season were pretty top notch. Your lead cast. I mean, I think Emilia Clarke especially, but I would even say Nikolai Coster-Waldau. A lot of them had to sell stuff.
Yeah.
That was hard. Like, they didn't have a lot to work with. And I mean, Nikolai Coster-Waldau even said, he's like, in an interview with Vanity Fair, he's like, yeah, in the earlier seasons, we actually had like time for this to like really sink in. He's like, now we have to kind of like write our own version in our heads to get to the performance we need to. And I would say all of them. Heck, dude, Kit Harington in that last episode was money. Like, that scene with him and Daenerys, he was amazing. Like, all of them. Peter Dinklage sold some really bad speeches really well. Like, I mean, again, I think, you know, Emilia Clarke especially, but I think your lead cast, all of them were giving it their A+ game this year. So
yeah, you're absolutely right. I think the acting was absolutely out of this world this season. So.
But back to R+L = J. Steven, I hope we answered your question. Yeah, we're disappointed. Again, yes, technically it served the purpose, in part served the purpose it was supposed to, but I don't think this was what it could have been. All right, so moving on to our Game of Thrones overview. So we're going to look back kind of like the series whole. So obviously we're kind of generally positive on Season 8. Now that we have the full picture, how do we think about Game of Thrones as a television show? I mean, this is 8 years of our life. We've podcasted most of it. Obviously, we like it enough. You know, is this one of the best TV shows you've ever seen? Is this like great television? Is this? Do you think we're gonna remember this in like 5 to 10 years? Do you think pop culture is gonna remember it fondly? Just some questions I throw out there, and I'll start with Austin.
It's definitely going to be remembered fondly. I think potentially unfairly. No. It's become one of those situations where it's almost like it's cool to make fun of it at this point. So I think it's going to end up getting looked back on as like one of those series that just dropped the ball really hard and the whole thing was ruined as a result.
So you think it's going to be like compared to Dexter?
Yeah.
Oh,
I do.
dang.
Or I mean, no disrespect, but Lost.
Fuck those people, they're wrong.
I mean, I understand.
Fuck those people, they're wrong. It's a great show.
I agree with Caleb,
I like the ending.
I just like.
Sorry, listeners, you can hate me forever. I love that show. I love that ending.
There's a lot of people that feel that way, and I do think this is going to end up as one of those. One of those that started off really well and collapsed at the end. I don't necessarily feel that way, but if we're talking about how history is going to look at it,
that's fair.
I think that's going to be the case.
I will say this. Because Lost has been on my mind a lot as I've been thinking about the ending of the show. Like a lot of people are comparing it to Breaking Bad. No, the show the way this ends reminds me the most of Lost. And it doesn't remind me of Dexter. Like, but that's also because Lost, I was the same way. I was on board. Like, I was like, okay, this is doing things differently than I expected. I generally like them. I actually think the last season of Lost is better. Like, if you're looking at 1-to-1 apples to apples comparison, I think the last season of Lost is probably, in relation to the rest of that show, better than this season is to the rest of Game of Thrones. Like season 6 of Lost is consistent with the show we'd seen up to that point. I think that was another case of people having wildly unrealistic expectations and also not paying attention to what the show was clearly trying to tell them, like what the story was. But anyway, oh man, people are going to hate me so much.
I mean, I always do, so I understand.
It's okay. But I've been lost a little bit because here's what I've noticed about Lost. The people who watched it. Hold on. No. This is important.
We got to talk about Lost here on this Game of Thrones podcast.
We're going to get
right?
Caleb's opinion on Lost is going to be on the internet.
I never got the podcast about it when it was on.
Exactly.
So,
get it out, Caleb. Get it out.
No, okay. No. But here's the thing. Stick with me now. The thing I noticed about that show is people who actually kind of have watched it after the fact, generally are way more on board with it than the people who invested all the time along the way. The people who are the angriest about that show are the people, generally speaking, the ones that I know are the ones who were there since day one, like me. Now, I don't know how I turned out the way I did, but that's a whole other conversation.
We ask ourselves that question all the time.
Exactly.
Right. But I'm just saying, like, I wonder if there's some similarity in the way Game of Thrones, people who stuck with it longer feeling more disappointed, people who are more invested in the novels, for example, being more disappointed. Do you think like 5 years from now, I'm going to be able to show this to a friend who didn't watch it when it was on, and they're going to be like, man, that last season just dropped the ball?
It could be really that depending on how George R. R. Martin finishes things, does or does not finish things, will really determine how people view the show.
That's a good point too.
I mean, because there's like the common viewpoint, which I do not share, that he's the messiah of writing. And
that's unfair too. That's a whole nother conversation. I mean, George R. R. Martin's a genius. Like, his writing is some of the best I've ever read. But
I'll put it this way. Had a smoke monster come out of a vagina and kill a major character in season 7 or 8, people would have lost their goddamn minds.
Yeah. Deus Ex Machina.
You're exactly right.
No, 100%. 100%. Wow. Well, we're on to it. Stull, what do you think, man? Is this still going to be remembered well? Like, what do you think of it as a whole piece?
I mean, it's going to be remembered well by me. I think it's going to be remembered, as Austin said. We're never going to forget Game of Thrones. I think what Game of Thrones has done, what it tried to accomplish, I think is remarkable. I think that it accomplished something that no other show will be able to accomplish. Yes, it had its problems, and yes, towards the end, it maybe kind of lost some of its steam that it had in the first couple seasons. But I think overall, as a show, I mean, I've said this before, it really feels like it's the end of an era with Game of Thrones ending. And I think that, to Austin's point, it may not be remembered by the internet fondly.
The internet doesn't remember anything
but
fondly,
I think given it a couple years looking back, this will be a show that we remember, like all the good times that we had with the show, the amazing and phenomenal actors that were on the show. Some of those early pieces were like, I know we're going to talk about some of our favorite episodes here in a little bit. And so, there are things that are going to be vivid and stick with me for the rest of my life with the show. So I'm going to look at it very positively. I know that other people won't, and I think that's unfortunate. I'm sorry that that they aren't feel unsatisfied. But for me, I don't think that. I think this will be a show to be remembered.
Yeah, I think that's fair. For me, yeah, same thing. Investment, characters, everything you said. So I'm not going to be a dead horse. Pretty much what Stull said about remembering the characters. And I just think, I don't know if we're going to see a show that's going to get a canvas this big, though. I mean, this is a huge scale. The scope of the show is enormous.
I mean, how many characters and storylines were on this show? I don't think we'll ever see that again.
It's insane.
Or will be a very long time before we see something like that again.
Yeah, no,
it's
absolutely.
Successful.
Absolutely. And again, I think the first 4 seasons are the best. The best. They just are. Like, there's not even a contest. Those 4 seasons of TV, specifically, I would say season 3 and 4, man, that is some of the best TV. That's some of the best TV. Like, the writing is, like, when I was rewatching, I was like, God damn, this is like, it's next level. It is unlike anything. And yeah, the latter half of the show didn't live up to that in that way. What it lacked in writing, it tried to pay off for in spectacle, which I'll also throw out there. The spectacle was also incredibly impressive.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, I don't think we're ever going. Okay, so like these big battle episodes, I don't think we're going to see another show that's going to be able to pull something like that off, at least on the regular. I mean, that's a huge thing. I mean, that last episode, the bells, I think that's the highest produced television I've ever seen. I don't think we're going to see another specific episode of television produced that well again. I just don't.
This goes back to kind of what you were saying earlier. You talked about season 3 and season 4 being the best seasons of television maybe ever. And this, you were talking a little bit about expectations. Like, is it like, how often are we going to get a season that is good? Is it really fair of us to expect it to be that good every single season? I mean, again, it goes back to what we were talking about earlier with our expectations as fans going into that final season. Cause it's, I mean, like you said, to me, that is like nothing has been better than that. And listen, I'm not saying, it's not wrong to have high expectations. I think it's fine. And also, it's perfectly good and healthy and to criticize a show like Game of Thrones, something this big, and it has a lot of problems. And the thing I will remember about Game of Thrones, though, I mean, obviously we have this podcast, of course. But the thing I'll remember is this show really talked about a lot of things that I don't think, on a scale that I don't think other television shows have been bold enough to do. That led to a lot of dicey territory, especially when it comes to like the politics of like some of the gendered conversations, but I will say even some of those that the show didn't handle well, it started the conversation where it made me rethink how I viewed like a lot of things.
And that's the kind of stuff that I think is really interesting. I think that's the kind of thing Game of Thrones did the best. When it's the themes it was playing with and the conversations it started about really awful things that happen on the show, either intentionally or not. Like, there are things they just dropped the ball. Me even thinking about race representation on the show, I was like, it wasn't something I considered until people started calling it out. And you're like, well, that's a good point. Again, some of the gender conversations, it's like, how is sexual assault on television presented? And it's just one of those things I was like, I hadn't thought about that as a, straight white guy, but I think it's important. And like, those conversations are not always comfortable, but I think they're meaningful. And I think it goes back to something that, that we talked about last episode, which is Game of Thrones is trying to do things that aren't things this big are generally going to crowd pleasing, fan servicey things. They are trying to make their people happy and feel good and all that. Star Wars, the more MCU, they're trying hard to not do that.
It got to be so big, so popular. And while all those criticizers are 100% fair,
yes,
there is no way it could do everything or be flawless.
No.
But because of the popularity of it, because of how much attention it had, people expected that of it. I think the social issues being like one of its major faults, but also probably it just can't do everything. It can't do everything that no other show is really doing well.
Right. Well, and again, I think the thing is, even when it does those poorly, my point is, and this is not me saying, oh, the show's okay for it. No. What I'm saying is the thing I'll remember that'll stick with me is even when the show might have handled some of these things poorly, it had us all talking about it and having challenging conversations through the lens of this television show. And I think that's what Martin's novels did really well too, to consider despicable people like Jaime Lannister, and actually like really delve into what that looks like. Anyway, it's a complex show. And I think for me, I also caught this at a very formative, like the earlier seasons at a very formative time in my life coming out right out of college. And it's certainly helped me reconsider how I view people. Like, people aren't good and bad, in or out. Like, it's just everyone's a complex, complicated mess based on their histories, their birth, their experiences. And people make decisions not necessarily because it's good or bad, but because it's out of their self-interest or because they feel like it's the right thing to do. I don't know. I think it's done all that really well. It's not the only show to paint characters that way, but I think this is in the lens, in the realm of fantasy, it did it exceptionally well.
And to piggyback off of your point, I know that I'm probably going to butcher this quote, but I know Martin has said before that like he doesn't see that things as good versus evil. Like the fight of good and evil happens inside every person. And I think if that's what you're left thinking about the show, then the show did one thing really well, and and that is it. I think that is one thing that the show, you cannot fault it for, is it showed us that characters all have good and all have bad in them, and it's up to them what they do with that. And I think that's one of the things that Game of Thrones has done absolutely phenomenally well.
Well, and their decisions for good and evil aren't necessarily motivated by the interest of doing good and bad.
Right.
Like, it's driven by self-interest, and it's interesting. And I think the quote something to the effect of like, Tolkien in more traditional fantasy looks at good and evil as like humans versus orc armies, and he says, no, the real battle for good and evil is happening internally in the human soul, which I think is a good point. So overall, Game of Thrones, hugely impactful show. We've podcasted about it for years. It's a little complicated, but I think complicated and messy in a good way. I think. Would you guys agree with that?
Yeah, I 100% agree.
Yeah.
I think the complicated nature of it is what made people even interested in it to begin with.
Excellent.
Yeah, I completely agree. It has a lot to say about me. Like, that's one thing I think I love about art is that a lot of times you see yourself in it. And I think Game of Thrones has done that for so many people. Like, you see yourself and you relate to all these characters. And so yeah, I agree with you guys.
Nobody talks about bad television. People just don't care about it.
Yeah.
The fact that anyone talks about it, anyone even bothers to criticize it, means that there's something there.
There's been an entire cottage industry built around Game of Thrones. I have a job because I did this podcast now. There are other people who have built careers specifically through their like knowledge and criticism of Game of Thrones on the internet. So I'm just saying, you know, it's one of those, I'm going to miss it. It's complicated, but I think to your point, that's part of why people like it. Yeah, man, so much to talk about. We could delve into all these different themes, but I just want to kind of leave with our listeners with our kind of final impressions of the show as a whole. Which is, we love it. It's a complicated mess, and yeah, maybe it didn't end as well as it started, but that doesn't make it bad TV.
Agreed.
All right, so let's go ahead, just for fun, guys. Humor me. Ranking the seasons.
So this one was kind of tough. At the bottom is 5.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we all agree. I actually think we all agree that season 5
season.
That was the season. That was Austin's second season on this podcast. I'm pretty sure that's when you're like, do I even want to do this anymore?
You're not wrong.
I know.
That season was horseshit.
Okay.
So that was pretty clear to me when I started thinking about this, is that 5 is at the bottom.
Yeah, I'm glad we agree, because I thought I was going to be a little controversial with that one.
No,
but apparently not.
no, 100%.
And
Okay. I'm
going to put 6. So I'm going to go ahead and say 6 is underrated, even though it's not going to be super high on my list. It's going to be underrated.
Season 6 is middle of the pack, but it is underrated.
Yeah.
It's got problems. I'll talk about it in a second. But yeah,
we'll get there.
Okay. But so we all agree season 5 is bad. Here's the thing. I rewatched season 5. Here's what was interesting to me. I remember it being bad, and confirmed it's really not good. But I will say this. It starts really surprisingly strong. I actually really like the first episode or two, and I really like the last 2 episodes. But damn, seriously, like the bookends are really strong. But dude, the middle of that season is bad.
It's rough, yeah.
It is grueling to watch that season, and it's become so clear that they were running out of source material and they're stretching it as far as they can go.
So for listeners, let's give a quick reminder of season 5. This is season 5 is when Sansa this is also when this is also in my goes back to when I started to get irritated by characters doing things the plot needed it to do, not what the characters would do. And I still to this day will die on the hill. A Baelish would absolutely not have sent Sansa to be with the Boltons. So that whole subplot happens that season. That makes me mad. And it's just depressing and upsetting, the sexual politics of it. Like, the whole thing is a mess. It's oppressive and sad, and it's messy, and it doesn't represent women well. It's bad. That whole subplot, bad. The Marine subplot, not very good.
Arya and fucking Bravos.
Yeah.
The infamous Dorne storyline happened that season.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of the
favorite storyline.
Austin,
nope, I did not say that.
Hold on.
Let's not say that.
I do want to reel this back. Austin, do you remember that once upon a time you were very excited for this?
I was super excited to go to Dorne because Dorne's super cool. Oberyn Martell was fucking amazing.
Yeah.
Why would I not want to see more Dorne?
And then we went there.
I
remember we literally...
we're really upset that we went there.
I remember we were all hyped. We're like, yeah, we love Oberyn. And we were like, well, they're sending Jaime and Bronn there. That's not like the books, but actually I'm really into it. So yeah, let's check it out. We love Bronn. We love Jaime. That was the first season that kind of teamed up together.
Dorne thing looks like it's going to be awesome.
It's got a really cool thing going on in the books. So we're like, yeah, this could be great. Oh, we got the Sand Snakes. We're going to have 3 mini Oberyns is what Austin said on the podcast. We were like, how could they mess this up?
3 mini Oberyns.
I had to cling to something, Caleb. All right, I was a broken man.
He was. To be fair, Austin is a changed man.
Actually,
after
it's true.
season 4.
Oberyn Martell did break Austin. It did break Austin. So, listeners, I know people don't like these last couple seasons specifically have different problems that I think are actually worse in some ways, but as a whole, season 5 was definitely the hardest one to rewatch.
I'm so glad we agree on this.
And you mentioned, you said you liked the beginning and the ends. I will say though, and Austin mentioned the books. Like, this was the season where they were running out of a book material at this point. So they ended the season with all these like cliffhangers. Like, you have Sansa and Theon jumping off the wall of Winterfell, and then you have like Stannis maybe died. Like, okay,
that's another thing.
So you had, even though the ending episodes may have been like a little bit stronger than the middle episodes, like the actual ending of where characters ended was like so cliffhangery and like not in a good way. Like, there are good ways to have cliffhangers.
It's real. Okay, here's another example of sloppy storytelling that happened that season when we weren't sure if Stannis was dead for a whole season. But the showrunners, when you go back and look at the interviews, they were like, "No, he's definitely dead." But then we're like, "But we still weren't on board with it, even though because the way they anyway." Yeah, season 5 is bad.
That's probably enough.
And also, guys, I'm sorry. Screw Ramsay Bolton. I hate that character. He's not fun to watch. He's not engaging.
He's flat.
He's so flat, and it's just cruel for the sake of being cruel, and it's not interesting.
Speaking of characters that never died on screen, Syrio Farrell is still alive. By the way.
Of course.
So Austin's holding on to this whole seriously did it to Joffrey. I'm still holding on to Syrio Farrell as alive.
There you go. That's
He
your
should have
conspiracy
showed
theory.
up and like saved Arya in the final couple episodes.
I still
Instead of the
think
Hound.
been the most-
I
Could
still
have been
think
instead of the Hound.
That'd have been the
Syria.
most fan fiction thing ever.
I still think Baelish is actually a faceless man who swapped his face with that little girl, and whatever that plot
He's alive.
was.
Believe in it, Caleb.
Yeah, true. I'm a Baelish truther. Okay, so season 5 is collectively the worst. I actually ranked these on Twitter the other day. I gave season 5 a C- 0.5. It was like I didn't want to quite give it a C-, but in retrospect, I give it a C-. Like it was rough. My next ranked season, Daniel, is actually going to be season 7.
Yep.
Agreed.
I agree.
Whoa!
What
We're
is
on
happening?
track for 2 seasons in a row. Okay.
Yeah.
We know what we hate.
This is here's the thing. In my rewatch this year, the first half of season 7, it is fast. It's very fast. The stuff's going to happen. But I was on board. I was like the scene, the impact was there. Every scene impacted well.
The Ed Sheeran scene was real good.
Oh my god! That when Danny and John meet for the first time.
That was our 20-minute argument, by the way, about the Ed Sheeran scene from season 7.
You know what? In retrospect,
Caleb
Ed
was going to
Sheeran-
die on that hill.
Listen, I almost died, guys. I did almost, in fact, die on the hill of Ed Sheeran's important. Which, by the way, it did still kind of highlight. I will say this. I think that was meant to signal that Arya might not be going down a path of vengeance.
You think
You're right.
so?
She was empathizing with the Lannister men.
It wasn't just
By the
like
way-
a private concert for Macy Jake. Wait, what's her name?
Macy Williams.
Macy Williams. Sorry.
I mean, it was, but also I think it was there to humanize the Lannister men, which was set up for this season. See?
Sure.
no.
All right, but seriously, I actually was pretty on board with season 7. Like, again, it is fast, but like, man, the loot train scene is probably still, that and Blackwater are probably my 2 favorite battles. The Bells is pretty up there for me too, but like those, like I just love when you have 2 characters you're super invested in going at each other. Unfortunately, no one consequential died.
Bronn should have died.
Hey, Bronn should have died.
Like he just should have. It would have made that whole season better. Just by having him
it
die.
would have helped.
Even though it would have been very sad to see Bronn go.
But then, man, it all breaks in episode 5. It's the 5th episode of that season's where it just, in my mind, I'm never gonna forget that they came up with the entire plot for this zombie, and firstly, the fact that this conversation happened and everyone believed it, all the greatest minds in Westeros are rolling with it, and then it all happens very fast. So if you go back and watch that episode, dude, they go all over very fast.
And Gendry becomes Usain Bolt overnight. I mean, he ran
so fast,
such a long time.
Dude,
that whole plot.
The whole time you thought he was rowing the boat with his arms. No, this is his legs.
he was building for that moment.
So let me put it this way, and then also if you look at it in retrospect, season 8, and then the whole thing, they captured the zombie to get Cersei on her side, didn't work. We all knew it wasn't going to work, but didn't work anyway. And guess what? It didn't really have that big of an impact to the season. So it's like, what was the point of all that? Again, first half season great. Season 7.
Literally, the only reason for that storyline was to give the Night King a dragon. That was it.
I mean, that's kind of what it feels like in retrospect.
Yeah, that's what it was for.
Yeah, it's bad. It's real bad, and I haven't forgiven it. I don't think I could ever forgive it. And also, that was where again, Baelish. Fine. I gave them both a B. I ranked these on letter grades, and they both have a B. Whatever. All right. So here's what I'm going to say. Here's what this. I would say season 8. Over it.
So we're
Next.
agreeing with
season 8.
Oh, I told you we were all going to agree on this.
I think, guys, this is the most boring thing ever. Someone please change their mind.
The next one, that's where it's going to break. Well, maybe.
I think
the top 3 is going to be the difference.
Okay.
I think we've talked about season 8 enough.
Yeah, no, everyone knows how I feel about season 8. So let's move on.
Ranked what?
Fourth,
yeah.
Or third lowest. Yeah, the third lowest. Yeah.
Okay, sure.
So that'd be 5th overall. Like
this is the most confusing shit.
Okay. For recap. In 8th place is season 5, in 7th place is season 7, and in 6th place is season 8. So now on 5th place, I'm gonna say season 2.
Oh, it is going to break here.
It's break. I'm going season 6.
Season 6.
Yeah, I'm going to go season. That's where I was going to. And like I said, season 6 is
close.
underrated.
It's close.
But I still put it right here.
It's close. Okay, let's talk about season 6.
Because my favorite moment comes from season 6. So
Okay, here's the thing about season 6. One, I will throw this out there right now. Winds of Winter is an A++ episode. That finale, okay, there's a little bit of the location warping, but like that Cersei blowing up the Sept guys.
that's my favorite moment.
I mean, that episode, and that's just the first part of the episode. That episode is jam packed with amazing moments.
I mean, that opening sequence of that finale in season 6, episode 10, where Cersei blows up the Sept, the score that goes along with that. Like, I listen to that thing, like that score, like every week.
The Light of the Seven.
The Light of the Seven.
Yeah.
I listen to that score every week just because it's so freaking good, and that whole sequence just makes that episode that probably one of my top moments of the entire show.
While I do not think this is the most interesting battle from a like storytelling perspective, Battle of the Bastards was a very impressive spectacle, like, and maybe one of the better pieces of spectacle in the show. Actually,
remind me here. Actually, does Jon die
5
at the end of 5?
Yeah, he comes back in 6.
Okay,
Hardhome is 5.
Hardhome is 5. That's what I said. 5 starts. It has a good first episode.
The ending is pretty good.
The ending of 5 is pretty good. Like in the season 5, episode 8, 9, and 10.
Watch Jon die.
Okay, but we're on season 6 now, Austin. You've already. This has already been finalized. You've already moved on. You already ranked 5 at the bottom.
You're right. 6 is solidly in the middle.
So it's the middle's for being Austin.
You guys, okay, Austin and Daniel say.
And 2's fair. I could flop those easily.
Okay, because here's the thing.
So I'm interested to hear why you think 2 is that low.
So okay. Season 2 is good. Season 2 is very good. Battle of Blackwater is amazing.
That's Tyrion as the Hand.
I know that's the best part of the season. That's like the only part of the season I gave that much of a shit about. In retrospect, rewatching it, and here's the thing. There's a lot of things that you thought you were invested in, but then they don't lead to anything. I mean, Renly Baratheon was all on that train. He dies really early. It's too sprawling. And I like that it's sprawling because season 3 and 4 are also very sprawling. Season 3 specifically, but I think season 3 hits a much better balance at making it feel more cohesive. They got the cadence of like swapping out the storylines. Season 2 felt like they had to check in with every character on every episode, whereas season 3 they kind of figured out what if we just focused on specific episode like storylines per episode, and I think that helped out tremendously. So I think season 2 is a little more muddled. I think Blackwater and Tyrion as the Hand is amazing. That is fantastic TV.
Tyrion carries it.
Yeah.
Tyrion carries a lot of the early seasons.
Yeah.
He is so good. Because seasons 1 through 4.
Yeah, seasons 1 through 4. After that, he just, it gets bad. It gets rough real fast.
I know it's an acceptable answer in my opinion. I think I could literally, Stull, what was your next one?
So the one after that
is not 2, is it? Because mine is 2. So I could easily flip-flop those.
I don't think I could easily flip-flop them. I think Tyrion's Hand is so good.
And also,
2 is probably there. I think the top 3 are really hard for me to sort out.
That's where it does get tricky for me too.
The top 3 are the easiest for me.
Really? Okay.
No.
Okay. And
so the next one for me would be 2, and I'm guessing it's for you at 6 is the next one.
Yeah, season 6 would be the next one.
We're close. We just have our 2 and 6.
So basically it comes down to seasons 1, 3, and 4.
Yeah.
All right. Should we just do a rundown of top 3?
Yeah, rundown of. Are we going to rank them right now?
Yeah, just Stull do his top 3.
Right.
Do your top 3.
All right, Stull, do your top 3.
Okay, so this 3 is the hardest for me to sort out. I think 1 is so good. I think 3 and 4 are phenomenal. Okay, I think I'm going to go with 4 is number 1.
Okay.
3 is number 2, and 1 is number 3. But I think
1's a tough one because it's different.
1 could also be number 1 or number 2 or number 3. Like, because it's the introduction to the show. Like, we intentionally skip battles that season for the sake of budget.
But that's when the writing carries it so much you don't care.
Which is why I think it's so good. And I think 1 is like in a weird way kind of an anomaly because it's just they didn't know what they had in season 1, and the fact that it was still that good, I think is I could understand someone putting season 1 as number 1. But for me, it's going to be 3. Season 1 is going to be in the 3rd ranking. Season 3 is going to be in the 2nd ranking, and season 4 is going to be the number 1 season of the show.
I will say season 4 is certainly the climactic payoff to basically everything we'd seen up to that point. Austin, you're shaking your head.
No, not shaking my head. Just thinking about season 4.
It's amazing. It's really great.
No, I actually agree 100% with his ranking. Stull, you and I where we like
You guys were 100%.
All right.
like we are the correct ones. So this is great.
I'm slightly different, but go ahead, Austin. Justify your decision.
Yeah, no. Season.
You're gonna put.
So I have season 4 as number 1, season 3 is number 2, and season 1 is number 3. Season 1, we'll just start there real fast. It is a bit of a bait and switch. Like, I thought I was watching Tolkien, and I was not watching Tolkien.
No.
And I didn't realize that until Ned gets beheaded. And even then, when it cuts to black, I'm like, he's not dead. He's not dead. Of course he's not dead. I think literally everyone who's first watched this thought, like, Ned
You're just
can't be dead.
You're waiting for something to
Bean,
happen.
Sean Bean never dies, right?
Well, I was in utter denial when that episode ended.
Well, it wasn't even like denial. It was like, it's impossible for him to die. I guess it is denial, but like,
But it's like if you're like watching Captain America and then Captain America died in the first half of the movie. You're
right,
like,
exactly.
Yeah.
So that can't happen.
Or Aragorn died in Lord of the Rings or something.
Just because of the tone that it sets. I don't think the rest of the season is actually all that strong. But the tone that it sets at the end of the season sets you up for the rest of the series. You're like, oh, I never seen anything like this before.
I honestly think Robert Baratheon is a super underrated character.
Robert Baratheon is my spirit animal.
He's such a good character.
He's a great character, but I had to remind Austin the other day, he is a great character. And yes, Danny definitely burned King's Landing to the ground. But I just want to remember the last time that someone sacked a city, it was Robert Baratheon and Tywin Lannister.
Look,
and there was plenty of raping and pillaging going on. So
this is the only man to ever say
he committed genocide, Austin. Genocide with a capital G.
Hurry up before I piss myself. All right? Like, come on. I can empathize with that.
He honestly was just a phenomenal written character. Like,
and Mark Addy delivered a perfect performance.
It was great.
Like, and when we talk about the great character of the show, he was a one-off wonder, basically.
Right.
But
God,
like, he may be the best. Like, I mean, Oberyn's the other one that comes to mind when he's only in one season. Robert is like right there. Like, he is such a good character. Like, he's honestly one of the best characters of the show. But no one ever talks. Well,
he and Eddard Stark really make that. See, their relationship carries it.
Absolutely.
And again, it's funny. I just want to remind people, and I'm not going to get on this train too much. Do you guys remember everyone was complaining about unceremonious deaths in Game of Thrones this season? I was like, were you guys watching?
Off screen? Yeah.
You remember that time that he dies off screen and he gets attacked by the boar off screen?
So conventional, like that. I was like, oh yeah, that's what I expected from fantasy shows at that point. So it wasn't a problem. Like someone dying off screen was not unheard of at that point in time. It was great. It was really great. And the way it just set everything up was really amazing. Season 3, a lot of my picks are based off of individual episodes, which is probably not really fair.
No, but some of the episodes in season 3 are really good.
So Reigns of Castamere.
Yeah, that's good.
That defines that season.
Yeah.
The build up to it. The Starks being like triumphant, have won battles. You feel like the Starks are killing it. They're thumping the Lannisters. This is going great. Everybody's happy. And then you realize, I forgot what show I was watching.
Yeah.
I forgot.
Well, and again, what I love about that is, again, it's interesting. People kept expecting Game of Thrones to go back to being conventional because season 1, Ned Stark dies. And you're like, oh, okay, so yeah, Rob's going to come and get vengeance. And then you're like, oh, but wait, Rob did other stupid stuff. And it's another one of those things. The 4 things that I love about Game of Thrones that season 3 highlights really well. Ned Stark and Eddard Stark. Every time you go back and rewatch it, not only does it see how well is it like planted and set up, it like is inevitable that their fates are going to happen.
Oh, it's so clear on the rewatch. You're like just hitting yourself like, how did I not see this coming?
Yeah.
Like, it's so clear.
Like exactly like Caleb said, we were convincing ourselves that like, oh, but this is actually just like standard fantasy. Like the hero wins.
We saw the shocking thing happen to set it up, but it's going to go back. The heroes are going to win at some point, right?
Right. We truly believed. That is why I chose Bran to sit on the throne. I was like, well, it has to be a Stark. Those are my exact words. It has to be a Stark because they're clearly the heroes of the story. Turns out I was right purely by chance because my reasoning behind it was not sound. But yeah, I mean, we expected the hero to still win.
Yep. So I'm imagining your first pick is
it's season 4, and it's literally because of Tyrion's trial. I still believe that to be the strongest acting performance of the entire series.
It's great.
It was so good. Oberyn Martell is, oh god, he's just the most
it's so upsetting
fun character of the entire series. I'm not going to say best. That's impossible.
He's so much fun to watch.
He's fun, and I wanted so much more of him, and it crushed my soul when we lost him. So yeah, for me, that's my reasoning. Well, how about you?
You guys are gonna get. You want to guess?
So
If
my
four's
guess
gotta
is
be top, right?
no. I'm thinking 3 is his top. I think 3 is his top, and 4 is under that, and then 1 he agrees with us.
I
Is what I think.
actually looked at your scores, but I can't remember anything about him.
So it's tricky because I actually think season 1 and season 4 can interchange. Because of all, I'm not going to repeat it. Everything you guys said about season 1, I just think I will say I do want to give more credit. Season 1, the writing was top notch. Again, I know there was lots of sex position in that season, like more than normal. I mean, because it kind of tones down in later seasons. But man, guys, some of those monologues in season 1 were so good. They actually had to go back, and this is again evidence that I think Benioff and Weiss actually know how to write really good stuff. Like they actually, if you go back the first season, every episode came up like 20 minutes too short. So they had to go back and add in a bunch of scenes for every character, like a bunch of those like long-winded monologues they wrote to fill time. And it's some of my favorite writing in the whole show. The scene between Cersei and Robert Baratheon about whether or not, like, about Lyanna Stark, that is amazing writing. Or the Baelish, the iconic Baelish, brothel scene where he's basically laying his motivations out. Like, I don't want to beat them. I want to fuck them. Like, I'm not playing their game.
Is the ladder?
No. This is when he's in the brothel, and like basically, it's really awkward. He's watching it's really. I have mixed of feelings about it, but the actual core of what he's saying is like he basically goes and talks about how he fell in love with Catelyn Stark, and he fell in love with Catelyn Stark, and
he can't play their game,
and basically because he's not a fighter, and he got beat by Brandon Stark.
As Severus Snape.
Huh?
He reveals himself as Severus Snape.
Kind of, sort of, a little bit like an evil Severus Snape, though. I mean, in a way, and that's why I think it's brilliant because he's basically like, I can't beat them at their own like fighting war game, so I'm not going to play their game, and I'm not just going to beat them. I'm going to like, you understand that what he has is purely driven by like vengeance to like kind of like show the enemies of the world that he's better than them, and yeah, good stuff. But also like a lot of the Varys stuff. Like I love the monologuing of season 1 that we kind of lose. Season 3 has a lot of it too.
Also, Khal Drogo was in that season.
Oh, dude, Jason Momoa. Yeah,
that's the only season he's in. But I mean,
to be fair, he's kind of awful, but he is.
Whoa,
I hate saying he's cool, but he's kind of cool.
He's so charismatic.
No, but like, he's not awful. Like the character's awful. Yeah, but I'm saying,
I mean, like
his
presence does awful things.
Oh yeah,
he's not a good person.
Go back and watch. He like is pouring, like murdering and raping people.
Like,
and
I do like to talk about how cool he is, but like he's not actually cool.
No, exactly. Well, see, that's the thing. That's where it all started. You think, oh, look at this guy. Okay, and also again, Khal Drogo. I love how like they subverted expectations. Extremely unceremonious death, and also he does one really truly like badass thing where it's where the dude has the scythe, he just like walks into it. But guess what? That gives him the wound that kills him. Like it's great.
Oh my gosh, guys! But Khal Drogo deserves such a better death. I can't believe they just killed him off screen like that.
To a disease. Like he's such a strong man.
He wasn't even himself when he died. He really so cheap. Anyway. So okay, season 1 and season 4 could go either way because, as I said, season 4 is the climax payoff. I think for the first 3, the War of the Five Kings, the Lannister drama,
it like
all
changes the world. It's where the world turns. Like you have 1, 2, 3, and 4 climax, and then the world's a different world now.
Yeah, correct. I think Tyrion scene, Oberyn Martell. I think the finale was the best finale. At that point was the best finale because usually the episode 9 was the big episode, and 10 they kind of it was kind of like a transition. If you go back and watch The Children, the season 4 finale, it's really great. That's where you see the Tywin Tyrion Shay thing go down. Like there's a lot of good stuff in that episode. So yeah, it's really close between season 1 and 2. I gotta say season 3 though because. Whether we're talking about Kiss by Fire, which when I was rewatching, I was like, it's like, I think it's season 3, episode 5. That episode, I mean, like, I remembered like it when I watched it. This contains like almost everything I love about the show in an episode. It's got some spectacle with the Hound, a Beric Dondarrion sword fight. It's got the Jaime bathtub scene. It's got the Jon Egret scene. I mean, there's like thematically, it all fits into the title, man. It is money. It is so good. But I mean, obviously, of course, the Reigns of Castamere. I think the Climb, that's the Chaos is the Ladder. That's that season. Again, I love all the Varys Baelish one-upsmanship and rivalry. That unfortunately, another criticism of the end of the show is like really, really awesome like rivalry they set up that never paid off in any meaningful way. I mean, Varys never even acknowledged that Baelish died. Like, it just, anyway. Yeah, like, there was lots of stuff like that. I love Elaine. I love the introduction of the Tyrells as a major player in the game. I mean, it is, yeah, season 3 is season 3, the spectacle is not as big. There is some. It's not as big as what we get. It's not, I don't think it has any of the air quotes best spectacle. I think season 4 definitely blows it out of the water there. But I will say, as far as like characters talking in rooms, scheming, plotting, backstabbing, setup, yeah, it's got all the stuff, guys. It's got all the stuff. That's also when Daenerys goes on her, again, I'm interested to rewatch it with what we know now, but it's when she goes on her, like, begins her campaign to liberate the slaves. Like, it's good stuff.
I think we're going to talk about this here in a second, but like, the best moments, the best episodes of the series are not battle.
No.
Oh, not at all.
No, not even, no. Like, there might be a battle kind of in there a little bit, but they're not battle episodes. Yeah. So speaking for a favorite episode, let's go ahead and wrap this up really quick, guys. What are our favorite, our top 5 episodes? It's tough. I'm just going to pick 5 random ones, but yeah. Oh, you want me to start?
Yeah.
So first and foremost, yeah, Kiss by Fire, season 3, episode 5. I definitely have to say the season 6 finale, The Winds of Winter. That's another example of season 6 has problems. They're starting to kind of lay the groundwork for some of the shortcuts they would take later. But man, like, they deliver some really damn compelling TV in that season. And I think Winds of Winter contains another instance of containing all the things about Game of Thrones I like in one episode. I'm going to go with The Mountain and the Viper because that was such a highly anticipated episode. And I felt like it delivered that sequence so well. And there's a lot of other really cool things that happen in that episode. That's when Jorah, his betrayal is found out by Daenerys. We get a lot of good stuff in that episode. Gosh, Blackwater. That is a battle episode, but the battle part isn't why. I mean, that's only a small part of why I like it.
The best part of that episode is the Hound.
I mean, he's one of the best parts of that episode. Correct. I love that I'm rooting for people on both sides, and also, yeah. I'm rooting for people on both sides to win and lose, you know?
Exactly. And Cersei and Sansa in that episode too have really, really good stuff. Like, you really see Cersei, you know, kind of like teaching Sansa, like, in like not in a bad way, but like she's like genuinely trying to like help Sansa learn like what it's like to be a queen.
She's coaching her.
Right, exactly. So there's a lot of really good stuff that goes on in there too. And you see Sansa, you know, she sings the hymn to try to encourage there's a lot of good stuff that goes on in the episode that has nothing to do with the, you know, actual battle action sequence itself.
Yeah. And then I'll just throw out there because I don't think anyone else is going to say it. So I'll throw this out there. A Night of the Seven Kingdoms, season 8, episode 2. I don't know if it's actually my top 5, but I think it's in the conversation, and I don't think you guys are going to pick it. So I'm going to throw it out there because I think it's a really top-notch episode. Which for me that was the most emotional episode of season 8, and I think I felt very rewarded for investing all of these characters up into this point.
Totally fair.
All right, Austin, we'll go to you.
All right, I'm going to stick Stull with like trying to come up with something new. First and foremost, Tyrion's trial. Easily.
Is that for The Laws of Gods and Men? Is that the name of that episode?
I have no idea. So mine are going to be like moments because I don't know the names.
Mine are going to be the same way also.
Caleb's going to look this up here. I'm going to let him have a little look.
Explain yourself.
It just literally the best acting of the entire series. The way Peter Dinklage just delivers that, and like you hear the desperation and just pure hatred in his voice in those scenes. Just disdain for his sister, his nephew, just everyone, the entire kingdom. He hates everyone. It's a beautiful scene, and I guess I can't speak highly enough about it. Aside from that, Reigns of Castamere, classic Game of Thrones. I think that's going to end up on most people's lists if they're talking about best episodes. Season 1, episode 9.
It's Baelor. That's yours. That's that episode is Baelor.
The
season 1, episode 9.
Yeah.
Hold on. This is taking way too long, but I did find it.
Because Ned dies at the steps of Baelor or whatever, right?
Okay. The episode you're talking to, yes, is The Laws of Gods and Men. That's the trial episode. Also written by Brian Cogman, by the way.
Is a great.
That's the Tyrion trial episode.
It's fantastic. So we got Tyrion's trial. We got Reigns of Castamere. We got Ned's beheading. The Door.
Yeah, that's actually the name of the episode. The Door. Yeah,
holds the distinction of being the only Game of Thrones episode that I cried in. That is just like a heartbreaking episode.
It's still heartbreaking when you watch it too. So the two most heartbreaking moments that still stung, I felt like just as much as they did the first time, were Oberyn Martell and the Hodor Hold the Door. That's a good pick.
And honestly, there's a lot that could go in the 5th slot. I can't think of any like one episode that stands out. But those 4 are really it for me.
All right, Daniel.
So you guys said the 5 that I was thinking of. I think no one, actually, I don't think anyone said this one. You said it earlier, but I think The Children, the season 4 finale,
it's very good.
Is Tyrion's climax. Like, that's really where Tyrion's character, hits his climactic part of his arc. He has stuff that he kind of does in later seasons, but that's really where his character hits its peak, is when he kills Shay and Tywin. So I think that episode and that finale really stand out. I can't not mention, I've already said that like my favorite moment, probably my favorite moment of the whole show is when Cersei blows up the Sept, so it's really hard not to mention the Winds of Winter, season 6 finale.
I did forget about the Sept.
Yeah, that's a really good one. It's just, it's so good. So that one. The other one that I was thinking about mentioning was The Mountain and the Viper, which was already mentioned as well. I think that just the emotional seeing Oberyn, this character that you just fall in love with so quickly, and seeing the way that he ends it, and like it's just so hard to watch because not only does he die, but it's just the way that he dies, where he is like he had the victory, like he had it in his hands, and his hubris just got in the way, and the world would be such a different place if
you
he
can
wins
move on, Daniel. You can move on.
Like
now.
if like the world would be so different if he wins that fight.
It's so frustrating because he's the guy who comes into King's Landing. He's ready to call out the bullshit of the Lannisters. He's ready to take them down. He's got the skill to win that fight, and he's got the political power and the weight to actually make a big difference and upset the current status quo.
You can't have a good person in this show. They're all going to die.
Yeah, he's the Mountain's like laying there basically dead. He starts turning to Tywin, calling Tywin out. Like he's going to win. Tyrion's gonna live. Tywin's next on the chopping block. Like it's gonna be a different entire show. If that happens.
Yeah, 100%.
Gosh. Okay. Sorry. Anyway, those 3 really stick out to me. You guys have, I think, said probably the top 5 best episodes. So I'm trying to come up with something
Which
different.
one is the
I'll throw
where Cersei does the Walk of Shame?
That's
phenomenal.
That sequence is phenomenal. That's a good episode. That is
5.
Mother. I think Mother's Mercy. That's the season 5 finale.
Right. And that's also where we get. Is that where we get Misha, or is that
No, Misha's season 3.
If that's the season 5 finale, it's also where we get John's death.
Yeah, it's John's death. That's also
a pretty crazy episode.
It's again, there's a lot of cliffhangers in that one that frustrate me, but yeah. But at that moment, the Walk of Shame is a very
another
amazing
one of those like super well acted.
So I think the whole High Sparrow subplot is very underrated. I'll be honest.
It's interesting. I think.
Ooh, did I? I mean,
well,
I just hated it.
So
you're probably right. It is underrated, but
I mean, I would say we'll save it for another talk, but we're not going to have another talk. So I'll just put it out this way. One thing that I think they were trying to pay off that I think landed more than some people did was just showcasing how all these wars the royals are fighting are impacting the common people. I think the earlier, actually really up through season, honestly, just season 6 and 7 and 8 have been the ones that haven't done it as well. But up to the first 6 seasons, you kind of get little glimpses here and there of like how all this is negatively impacting the common people. It's never like a main plot per se, but it's a supportive plot point. And I think the High Sparrows is kind of, in a lot of ways, is the consequences of them ignoring the common people. And like, oh, look, all these people are starving and they're desperate and looking for hope. So what do? They turn to religious fanaticism because that's a real thing that happens in the real world. And then those religious fanatics figure out how to manipulate the political system to actually gain power. It's underrated. And he actually gets a really kick-ass monologue in one of the season 5 episodes. Anyway, sorry, tangent. We're never going to have a time to talk about this again.
Right.
I actually really like the show highlights. Not super important, but I like how it highlights the struggles of the common people. And the High Sparrows, I think, was designed to actually pay off on, hey, you guys are fighting each other, but it's actually really hurting those people, those little people down there.
So one thing I'm going to name that I think maybe I don't remember the whole episode in its full context, but I remember parts of it, and no one's mentioned it yet. I'm going to mention the finale to season 1. I think that at the end of season 1, I remember specifically after Caleb was introducing me to the show, and he asked me at the end of season 1 who my favorite character was, and I remember that I told him it was Dany. And now, if you guys know me on the podcast, like I've never been a fan of Dany on the podcast.
Because that was before she started like executing people and burning people.
Everybody liked Dany in the beginning,
But like
You're designed to.
her story in season 1, like coming from this like innocent, helpless little girl.
It's a great story.
Like her moment there at the end of the season 1 finale where she gets her dragons, and like that is a really powerful moment, and like really sets the tone for the rest of her character arc coming up to season 8. So I think that's one we could mention. I don't honestly remember what happens in the rest of that episode, so I don't know as an episode how much it stands up, but I think that's a moment we should probably mention.
Yeah, that's fair.
So that's one that came to mind as well.
I am going to throw out there, going back to the loot train battle, the spoils of war. I think that is probably one. I don't know if it's top 5, but it's up there. One of my favorite episodes of the show, and it's in season 7. And then it's literally the next episodes where it goes downhill, and I'm like, oh dang. Yeah. All right. Well, we hit on a lot of fun moments there. A couple more questions we're going to hit on. Austin, I think we'll just ex-nay the fantasy league unless you want to talk about it.
There's nothing.
Okay. All right.
We talked what we.
Yeah.
There's nothing to add.
Okay. We might just kind of wrap up. Mention at the end. All right. So next question comes from Nathaniel Masters. Masters, no relation. I'm certain. Nathaniel Masters. What is Arya up to on her ship, and will they eventually do some kind of follow-up show? So I'm really glad you asked that about that, Nathaniel. I think we mentioned this last week, but in the time since we last talked about this, one of the HBO executives, I think it's Casey Bloys, I think, a HBO executive said they are not going to be doing any spinoffs based off of any of characters in the show. It was actually a really interesting interview because he basically couldn't say anything, and the reporter was asking really hard-hitting questions, and he was basically deflecting everything. It was a very awkward read, but one of the things he said was, no, we're not going to do we're not doing at this point in time, we have no plans to do a spinoff show that will follow up. So, which kind of ties back to what I was saying last week. I don't think they saved Jon for a spinoff. I don't think they saved Arya for a spinoff. I think this is genuinely where they were supposed to end up based on Martin's ideas.
I agree. And as you guys know, Arya has always been a personal favorite of mine. And, I'm really glad that, despite all the rushness and all that, she ended up where she did. She had sort of a redemption arc. Because at the end of season 6 and season 7, we were really...
she was like statistically killing people.
Right, exactly. And so I'm really glad that she got this little bit of a redemption. Again, maybe it was a little, whatever. There was problems. But I think this is so Arya, going off on a ship and exploring. Like she always, I think back to the scenes with Tywin in season 2, where she talks about how she had so much admiration for these Targaryen women and how they would go and, explore the world. And that's always really been a part of Arya, is wanting to go out and explore and see things. And so I think it really, really is fitting for her end. But to your point, I would honestly be upset if they did something with Arya, because I feel like this is a really, really solid ending for her. And to try to mess with that would be very problematic, I think.
Yep, indeed. So we'll move on to our next question from Daniel Escovel from Dallas, Texas. Daniel asks, why does Austin hate Sam so much? He discovered how to defeat White Walkers. He learned Jon's true lineage and found a cure to grayscale. Without his knowledge of all of Westeros would have been defeated by the White Walkers.
I mean, Sam's the true hero of the show.
He did a lot of stuff. And he killed Thins, too. We didn't even mention the Thin killing.
He killed 2 of them, didn't he?
Two Thins.
Yeah.
And White Walkers.
Do we really need to do this again? We're gonna go through all this once more. It
wouldn't be Caspian on the Wall if we didn't.
That's true. If we didn't cover old territory over and over. Look, my issues with Sam, one, about Jon's lineage, does not matter.
We already talked about that.
We got fucking Westeros Google and Bran. Like Sam didn't even need to tell anybody because Bran knows everything. Finding a cure for grayscale, big whoop, I guess.
That's like finding a cure to cancer.
Well,
who cares?
Okay.
What?
So they say Jorah just died anyway.
No, it's not just Jorah, but they have that cure they can use on all sorts of people with grayscale.
So I'm actually going to defend Austin here, not in the way his reasoning. I just don't think he came up with the right reasoning. He didn't discover.
My reasoning's always right.
He didn't discover the thing of the cure for grayscale. It had already been discovered. The Citadel just determined it wasn't a reasonable way to cure it. But like Sam didn't discover anything. He just read something in a book.
So my issue with Sam.
He
You're right.
effectively
Thank you,
cured a
Daniel.
man of grayscale. He's Jesus the Messiah.
I was trying to give Austin a little bit of
Are we calling George R. R. Martin the Messiah again? Is that what we're doing here? Because that's who Sam is. Sam is George R. R. Martin written into the story. Like, it blatantly so.
I don't know what your problem is, Austin.
Sam literally wrote the book Song of Ice and Fire.
No. Actually, talking about small corrections, he did not write that book.
Credit for
Professor
everyone else's work.
Slughorn, who's at the Citadel, wrote it. He just named it.
No, this is a character that exists in the Game of Thrones universe, but does not follow the rules of the Game of Thrones universe.
Of course it does.
A character that consistently makes terrible choices, bad decisions, and does not die, is not faced with the consequences of those decisions. Most egregiously at the Battle of Winterfell is laying under a pile of White Walkers with 2 tiny daggers without the skills or the strength to do anything about it, but somehow freaking survives. When he's up north of the wall, a White Walker literally walks past him, looks at him, says, "You're not even worth my time."
And then Sam kills him.
That does happen.
Okay, you know what?
The White Walkers walk right past
Austin,
him.
I actually disagreed with you up until the Battle of Winterfell, I think, pushed me over.
Right,
Finally.
that's stupid. It's stupid.
Because here's the
Now,
thing. I
the thing
basically
with
was totally cool. I love the idea that this one guy just happens to get really he's incompetent, but he just somehow manages to survive because that's how it happens sometimes. But then the Battle of Winterfell, they put him in a scenario where he would totally 100 million % be dead. And he didn't die.
There are a lot of those scenarios throughout. And they just compound, right? Like, it's one thing, he got really lucky this one instance. But there's 6 instances where he should have died and lived. I hate him because he doesn't follow the rules of his own universe. And because of that, he becomes a very blatant, kind of self-serving character for the author of the books.
I totally disagree with you, but it's okay. It's okay. Well, I only mostly disagree with you. We don't know how he's going to end up in the books as far as the Battle of Winterfell, but yeah, in the show, that's pretty dumb. Daniel, Austin, what do you think about John Bradley? I mean, you were personally attacking him earlier this season. I mean,
I stand by what I said. This man is just as responsible as George R. R. Martin for this travesty of a character.
He's just an actor trying to get paid.
Yeah, I know. It's all about the money, isn't it?
So I actually think John Bradley did a really, really good job portraying
the
Sam.
poop and scoop scene was really good.
I forgot about the poop and scoop scene.
I think his. We talked about this a little bit. His performance when Daenerys tells him that his family has been
that was
executed.
great.
I think he performs that moment well. As much as I personally,
that never really. I mean, super actually paid off, did it?
Right.
No, okay.
Well,
a great performance though.
Oh yeah. So we're speaking about John Bradley.
Yes.
Yeah.
Correct.
So I think he played it's not his fault Sam did all those things. He just did what he was supposed to do. I mean, so there's no problem there. So as much as I actually personally kind of like Sam, I think Austin's point's 100%.
I was totally against him until the freaking Battle of Winterfell.
I think that his any other character in his position on the show would have 100% paid way more consequences or possibly died. So
Austin,
I think I'm gonna give Austin a little bit, throw him a bone here. I think I agree.
How dare you betray me, Daniel?
No, I don't hate Sam at all. I like Sam.
Nostradamus is never wrong, guys.
I think his point is correct.
Listen, Austin, I just have a feeling that you're going to be haunted by the ghost of John Bradley and Samuel Tarly for the rest of your life.
If he ends up in a Tolkien-based show, I'm going to lose it.
I hope he gets cast in the Lord of the Rings show.
He's very Hobbit-like.
Yeah. I'm just saying, Dan.
What if he was in the Lord of the Rings show?
I think he might. I think that could happen.
Totally
that could 100% happen, by the way.
I hope he just stays in the Shire the whole time.
Austin, you can never escape John Bradley. He follows you everywhere you go.
He grows a beard. He becomes a dwarf.
I mean, you literally have so many.
He's staring at you every day.
Right?
Yeah.
You're not wrong. There is a shrine of John Bradley.
Just wait
in my office.
He's going to haunt
you.
you.
Looks at me all day while I'm working.
I'm sure there's a listener.
He really inspires me to be useless at work, frankly.
I'm sure there's a listener right now listening, thinking, you know what? I've got an extra little bit to spend. They'll probably send you
some more. Yeah,
send
Austin more Samuel. He is the biggest fan.
Send Austin more Sam stuff.
For someone who's not
bonfire.
For someone who hates Sam so much, he seems to have an awful lot of Sam stuff on his wall. Oh my goodness. Well, thank you, listeners, for sending in your questions for us to discuss. We're going to wrap up the show. This actually went quite a bit longer than I expected, but hey, it's been a fun talk, guys. We actually did it. We're going to, I don't necessarily, we were going to talk about favorite members of this podcast, but we don't need to go into detail. I just want to say that it's been an honor podcasting with you guys. This podcast has been a huge part of my life, both personally and professionally. It's helped me process the show on a weekly basis on how I feel about it, which has been hugely helpful. We've made a lot of new friends through this podcast. I've gotten closer to some old friends, and having you gentlemen here as my co-host, you guys were reliable, true friends. We weren't doing this for money. Like, that's just straight up. Like, this has been purely a pursuit of pleasure that a few thousand people a week decided they wanted to listen to. So, firstly, thanks to everyone who's tuned in over the years.
I mean, this podcast, you literally brought people from all across the country, together, in this moment. So we were talking about favorite moments of the podcast or whatever. To me, it's got to be this one. Like, I finally met Austin, and
after several years, this has been building since 2014.
Yeah, so I mean,
2013, if you really want to go all the way.
So I resonate with all what you were saying, Caleb. I've loved this podcast. I think it's been such a fun ride, and I've loved experiencing it with both of you guys. So it'll be something that I remember for the rest of my life. So I'm sad to see the podcast go, and but it'll always be cherished. I always cherish.
It'll always
this
be in our
podcast.
hearts.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, that you guys, the very large number of guest hosts we've had on the show to bring their input and their support. Everyone who's listened, tweeted, called in. For a while, we were live streaming podcasts.
We did for a stretch do live streaming, like Google Hangouts.
Yeah.
It was broadcast, yeah.
And people wrote live questions. All of that kind of made this worth it. Like, we just did this for fun. It was just something that friends did for fun because we liked the show. We wanted to hang out and stuff. It turned into something a little bit bigger. We did a charity podcast.
Yep.
We had some level of success that I was never expecting to have. I didn't think anyone would ever want to listen to me complain on a weekly basis, but here we are.
Then you found out that's what the internet's built on.
Yeah, turns out that's all anyone ever fucking does.
I mean, thanks to the hosts we had over the years, we got this covered.com. We're on there for 2 seasons, and of course, our friends over at Good Trash Media, who are currently hosting the show. It was nice to have some people to partner with on this show who believed in us, who helped put our message out there, help put the podcast out there, It's really silly. It's really sentimental, but the real Game of Thrones were the thrones we made along the way.
Oh, this is
the friends we made along the way. But seriously, in all sincerity, guest hosts, listeners sending messages in, all of this has become something a lot bigger and more exciting than I can possibly imagine. And has helped my career in a lot of ways too. So it's like, this is a really cool thing we did for fun because we wanted to talk about things we liked, and people also tuned in to enjoy us talk about that. People liked sending Austin Sam stuff on a weekly basis. I mean, that it's the community. It's the community. It's the friendships. It's analyzing the show and really trying to figure out what it means to us. But so thank you everyone so much for tuning in to the Cast Beyond the Wall. Will there be another podcast with the spinoff shows or show? Never say never. Probably will look a lot different than what we did here if that happens. Might not have the same hosts. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. I don't know. Again, never say never. But stay subscribed for more on that. But, I also am not making any promises that will happen. All right, gents. Well, I say we go ahead and sign off the only way you could ever sign off on a Game of Thrones podcast, really. And now our watch has ended.